What's it like the day you get a call saying at 24 years old, you just won a $300 million government contract?
No f***ing way. If you're willing to grind, you can make a lot of money in this business, but it's not easy money.
What was it like the day you found out a movie was going to be made?
Oh, that was crazy.
David Packouz, the man who inspired the movie War Dogs, went from being described by Rolling Stone as the stoner arms dealers to convicted felons who defrauded the U.S. government.
Government contracting is the business of selling to the government. Once you learn the system, it's just a never-ending sea of opportunities.
How does the big contract come about?
I bumped into my old friend Ephraim, and he shows me his Bank of America account, and he had 1.8 million sitting in his account at 18 years old. So he started teaching me the whole system. So they put out the solicitation for a massive contract, everything from like pistol ammo, machine gun, 1 million grenades.
Wait, 1 million grenades?
Yeah, it was a submission deadline.
Yeah.
He sees the postal officer about to lock the door. He like pushes the guy out of the way. And he's like, oh, I'm sorry, this is a matter of national security. We have to get this out today. Oh, we're Our contract specifically said no Chinese ammunition allowed. We didn't know that the ammunition in Albania was Chinese.
Holy shit.
Yeah. Aircraft load, we submitted the certificate of conformance, and one of the things on this document was place of origin. And we put Albania, and they said, well, you knew it was actually China. So each submission of this document is an act of fraud. 71 acts of fraud. So you're looking at 355 years in prison. Unless
Hey guys, welcome to this episode of the Passionate Few podcast. Today we have a special interview with none other than David Packouz. Dave, thanks so much for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, man. So before we get into this epic interview, I got to ask you first question. What's it like the day you get a call saying at 24 years old, you just won a $300 million government contract? What's the first thing that goes through your mind?
No fucking way. That's what went through my mind. I was like, no way. We really won this because we really didn't expect to win. That's the truth. We thought that we had a chance of winning because we technically qualified, to bid on it. But we knew we were bidding against the major defense contractors like General Dynamics and ATK Systems. These are multi-billion-dollar publicly traded companies, and we knew this was a major contract that they were very set on getting. In fact, we bumped into some of their the heads of their departments at trade shows, and they told us, they're like, oh yeah, we know you're working on this, but don't worry about it, we got this. Yeah. And so we're like, oh, they're like, we have a whole team on this. They had like 100 people in their department. It was just us two guys in a living room.
In your 20s.
And yeah,
and you guys are just like smoking weed, taking bong rips.
Pretty much, yeah.
Imperfect actioning this whole thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Holy shit.
Yeah, so we didn't really think we were gonna win.
That's so crazy.
But when they told us that we won, we were like, holy crap, now we have to deliver.
Yes. Yeah.
So it was excitement and fear as well.
So take me back, you're 24 at the time you guys win this, but when do you get into government contracting and what is it? And then we'll touch on your story a little bit for people who might not know it yet.
Right. So government contracting is really the business of selling to the government, right? And the way the government does business is they are required to, by law, whenever they want to buy anything, to post it on a public website. In the federal government's case, it's sam.gov, like Uncle Sam.gov. And they post what they call solicitations, which is a request for a price, request for quote.
And mostly wholesale products.
So it's really an enormous variety of products. So the government employs millions of people. They have military bases and other government installations all over the world, and they have to support all those people. So if you think about some of the largest corporations in the world, like General Electric, that has like 300,000 employees. They have their own healthcare system. They have their own, they hire people for entertainment. They have corporate retreats. They have massive support staff. Now multiply that by like 10, 20 times. That's the federal government, because it employs millions of people, and in some really far off corners of the world, particularly in the military's case, and they have to support, they have to give them the food, they have to give them clothing, all sorts of services, and they need to buy all those things. So the way they buy it is they post on sam.gov, we want to buy XYZ, and here's the deadline of when you could submit your bid. And then everyone who's registered with the government to bid on these contracts submits their best offer to the government. The government is not allowed to tell anyone what the other competitors are, what the prices they're submitting. And after the submission deadline, they pick usually it's a combination of the lowest price and who they think is most reliable, depending on the contract. If it's a really small contract, they usually just go by lowest price. But if it's a large contract, then they have certain minimum requirements that you have to show what they call past performance, which is proof that you've done this kind of business before. And depending on the specifics of the contract, various other requirements. It's always listed in the solicitation. So that's how government contracting works. And it's not just arms. People think, government contracting is all about arms dealing, but arms are a very small part of it. It's my first contract when I got into it was for 40,000 gallons of propane that I delivered to an Air Force base in Wyoming. So they literally buy everything. How old were you then? So when I just got into it, I was 22 years old.
And so that's crazy. You go from not getting into it to in 2 years winning a $300 million contract.
Yeah, it was about a year and a half, but yeah.
And I know your life was actually based on the true story of the film War Dogs, with Miles Teller, Jonah Hill, directed by Todd Phillips,
right?
Where they talk a little bit about your story. But before you get into this, can you take us kind of way back to your childhood, and if entrepreneurship was along the path, or how the heck did you end up going from a normal kid to a nine-figure government contractor in your early 20s?
Well, I've always been into business. In fact, my first business that I started, I was 6 years old.
Wow.
Yeah.
Where'd you grow up?
So I was born in the United States in St. Louis, but when I was a kid, my family moved to Jerusalem, to Israel. My family's Jewish. And so when I was 6 years old, we lived in this old apartment building, didn't have an elevator, didn't have a garbage chute. So you have to take your trash down the stairs, and depending on what floor you lived on, it could be quite a trek, out to the dumpster on the corner and toss out the trash. And so I remember I was playing Legos with my sister, who's 7, and my mom asked us to take the trash out. And we were like, oh, we don't want to take the trash out, we want to play Legos. And my mom started getting a little annoyed, and my dad heard her, kind of getting irritated. And so he came by and he's like, what's going on? And my mother says, they don't want to take the trash out. And he says to us, he's like, you guys are looking at this all wrong. You think this is a big hassle, but really it's a big opportunity. And we're like, what are you talking about? How's taking the trash out an opportunity? And he says, well, think about it. All the neighbors probably don't like taking their trash out either, right? So you could offer them a service that for a little bit of money a week, you take out their trash, right? And we're like, wow, that's a great idea. We could make money. And so we went to all the neighbors and offered them this service. And it was like for a shekel a week, which was like a quarter, for a whole week. Every other day, we'd do 3 days a week, take out their trash, and we signed up 8 neighbors.
Wow.
Yeah, and so we were making a whole $2 between us.
Yeah, you got recurring revenue.
Yeah, exactly. And which was, for us, it was a decent amount of money, because back then, ice cream only cost like 50 cents, and that's really all I spent it on. That's fun. So that was our first business. That was my first business, and it lasted a few months. Saved up quite a few shekels, and then I realized, I have enough money to buy ice cream for the foreseeable future in my 6-year-old mind, and then I decided I didn't want to do it anymore because it was a lot of work. We were pretty small, and the garbage was heavy. So that was my first business.
And then do you transition to try other stuff through high school, or what happens in that sort of teenage period?
Well, during high school, I got into the usual, I got into smoking weed, and so got into selling a little bit of weed here and there, got into some trouble with my high school. Eventually, after high school, I went to Israel for 2 years to study because my parents insisted. My parents are very religious, and I didn't want to be religious, and so they decided they wanted to. They thought I would come back to the religion if I would go to study in Israel. And after Israel, it didn't work. I had a great time in Israel. It was mostly I spent it more partying than studying. But after Israel, I went to University of Florida, and I realized at that time that I was going to need to make money to support myself while I was in college, and all my friends, they were like flipping burgers, working minimum wage jobs, and I was like, that really sucks. I don't want to work for $5 an hour. And I had been in a car crash when I was 16, and I had some like neck issues, and so I'd gotten massage therapy to help with that. And so I realized that massage therapists make like $75-100 an hour. And so
how much?
Like between $75 and $100 an hour, depend if you work for yourself, not for a spa. If you work for a spa, it's more like $30 to $40. But so I realized at the time that the ladies like a guy who could give good massages. So that was like an additional.
And you're in Miami, so you got all the dominoes lined up.
So I decided to take a little break from university and go to massage school to get my massage therapy license. Started doing massage, and then this was at the time. This is in the early 2000s, like 2002, 2003. And digital cameras were starting to become a big thing. I bought a digital camera, but one of the biggest expenses of the digital cameras back then was the SD card. The SD cards were super expensive back then. So I didn't really want to spend that much money on an SD card, so I kept on looking for a better price. Eventually, I came across a company that was exporting from China, but they insisted on me buying 100 of them instead of one. I realized the price was so good that I could sell the rest of them on eBay. So I started selling SD cards on eBay.
For a profit.
For a profit, and that started going really well. I started buying more of them, ramping up. And then I bumped into a friend of mine from Israel who, he asked me what I was doing, and I told him about the SD cards, and he's like, oh, wow, that's really cool that you're able to find a factory in China that you could buy from. I'm actually in the business of selling bed sheets and towels. My dad, his dad owned a nursing home, and so he set up his son, who was my friend, to sell his nursing home and his buddies who owned other nursing homes bed sheets and towels. And
so that's true from the movie.
That's true, yeah. So he told me, he's like, I buy all my stuff from distributors in the United States, but I know they're buying it from factories overseas. So if you could get a connection directly with the factory overseas, I'll buy from you if you can beat their price. And I said, sure, why not? So I started looking for all these factories. Eventually, I found a great connection in Pakistan that made really high quality bed sheets and towels for a really good price, and started selling it to him and to other nursing homes. Unlike in the movie, I wasn't taking it to the nursing home and trying to convince the guy in person. I never bought a massive amounts of linen and had it stacked in my house. I had some samples, but not like I didn't have stock. I was pretty much just brokering. So I would have a big order from a nursing home or a hospital. I would
drop ship it.
Exactly. I would just do pretty much drop shipping. Yeah, exactly. So that's how I got into that.
And you start making a couple $1,000s doing that, or tens of thousands?
I was actually doing pretty well. So I was doing that for about a year, and after about a year, I had saved up from all the businesses altogether about $100,000. So I was doing pretty well. I thought I was kind of hot shit because I had a lot more money than all my friends at the time. And then I bumped into my old friend Ephraim Diveroli, and he kind of, made me a bit more humble because so his story is we knew each other from synagogue. Both of our families are religious Jews, and Orthodox Jews, they go to synagogue 3 times a day. It's a big pain in the ass, and extra long on Saturday. So neither of us liked to pray, and so we'd sneak out of the synagogue and go hang out on the basketball courts, and that's kind of how we got to know each other. He's actually 4 years younger than me. In the movie, they say we're the same age, but you know. But
and he was how old at this time?
So he's 4 years younger than me. So he was like 18 years old when we connected. So when he was 16, back, when I went to Israel, I was just coming back from Israel when he got kicked out of high school because he got caught smoking weed. And his
so you guys
parents,
bonded,
yeah. And so we used to smoke weed together as like teenagers. And so his parents told him, look, if you're not going to follow the rules of the school, you're going to you're going to find out what life's really about. You're going to join the workforce if you're not taking school seriously. So they sent him to LA to work for his uncle. His uncle owns this big pawn shop in South Central LA. And one of the things pawn shops sell is guns. And he got obsessed with guns. He became like a gun nut. Teenage boys, they become obsessed with like sports, guns, guitars, so it's like, that's like the usual thing, right?
Yeah.
I was a guitar guy. I was playing guitar. I'm a musician.
As you play in the movie, yeah.
Exactly.
That's right,
that's my cameo. Yeah, I play guitar. I sing, and so anyway, so he became obsessed with guns and started selling the guns to the customers. And his uncle was bidding on. His uncle started selling to the local cops. The cops said, look, if you want to sell on a larger scale to the department instead of to us individually, you have to go through the system. You have to do government contracting. So his uncle started bidding on these contracts. And he got Ephraim to help him bid on the contracts. And that's how Ephraim learned government contracting. Yeah, and so Ephraim worked with his uncle for about 2 years. And after about 2 years, when he was 18 years old, Ephraim claims his uncle screwed him out of like 70 grand. And his uncle claims Ephraim screwed him. Yeah. They're both well-known scumbags. I believe them both. And so he decided to leave LA, go back to Miami, and start his own company, AEY Inc. He actually was not even 18 at the time. He was like about to turn 18, so he had to use his dad's company. His dad had started AEY like a few years before that as like a label printing business, but then let it kind of go dormant.
Yeah, I love that AEY is actually the company in the film, and they don't even know what it stands for.
Yeah,
in the movie.
so
like it didn't even matter.
Yeah, so it actually in the film he's like, oh, it doesn't stand for anything. It just sounds cool. In real life, it did stand for something. It's the initials of his father's 3 sons. So the E in AEY is Ephraim.
Right.
So, and it's Avrami, Ephraim, Yeshaya. That's his 2 brothers and him. So he took over AEY Inc., registered it with the federal government to bid on government contracts. This was like 2004. So this was right after the invasion of Iraq, which happened in 2003, and the United States pretty much bombed Iraq, and Saddam Hussein took over, and then the idea was to build a democracy there. And so part of that nation building exercise, they had to supply all the police and Iraqi army with weapons, ammunition, equipment. So they were putting all these items up for bid on the government contracting system. And because he already knew the gun industry very well from working with his uncle.
He was in the perfect timing
Exactly.
position.
He was in the perfect timing, perfect position for it. And so he started bidding on all these contracts, and he started winning a bunch of contracts and started making decent money.
And were they big at the time? Because he was only 18.
So he was 18. Yeah. So after about a year of working on his own, that's when we bumped into each other at a mutual friend's house. We were smoking weed as usual, and he asked me, he's like, so what are you doing these days? And I told him about my SD card business, my linens business, and he says to me, he's like, a lot of the stuff you're doing can be applied to my business. I'm doing government contracting, and I'm doing really, really well, but I'm looking to expand my business. So I'm looking to bring on a partner, and you're a very smart guy. We've known each other forever. I know I can trust you. So why don't you come work with me? I bet you're going to make way more money working with me than working in your own business. And so I said to him, well, how much money have you made? And he says to me, he's like, you know what? I'm going to tell you, but just to inspire you, not because I'm bragging. And he opens up his computer and he shows me his Bank of America account. and he had $1.8 million sitting in his account.
Just liquid.
Just liquid.
At 18 years
At
old.
18 years old.
Yeah.
And I was like, holy crap. You know, I mean,
and
I
you
thought
killed yourself for 100.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, I thought I was hot shit, and you know, by making 100K at 22, which was way better than anyone else I knew at the time. But then he just like blew me away. I'm like, he made almost $2 million on his own doing this business. And so I told him, well, yeah, you obviously know something I don't. You know, tell me what you know. Show me how to do it.
Show me the way. Yeah.
Exactly. And so he started teaching me the whole system, how to spot solicitations on the site that you have a chance of winning, how to estimate prices, various ways of researching things, how to figure out things that you have that you're actually qualified to win, so you're not working on things that you're wasting your time. And at first, the idea was that I would expand the business by going into fields that he wasn't in. So he was already doing ammunition and weapons, so I decided to focus on fuel. And after about like 2 to 3 weeks, I won my first fuel contract, which was the 40,000 gallons of propane. We were splitting it 50-50.
And how you guys are sourcing these deals is purely just imperfect action, cold calling? I mean,
Google
I think
and cold calling.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people hearing this would go, yeah, easy for them. They probably had contacts or whatever.
Oh, no, I had zero contacts. Zero contacts.
So you're just looking at a contract and going, okay, let me just piece it to, let me just hop on Google.
I pretty much go to Google and I look for propane wholesalers in the area, because, you know, so you have to, it's a delivered price. So you have to calculate logistics into it. So, and that could make or break the contract. So it was to be delivered to Wyoming by a certain date, and so I was looking for propane wholesalers, and some wholesalers won't give you the time of day and they won't respond to you, but some of them will bend over backwards to do business with you.
Hey guys, we'll get right back to this video in a sec, but first, I have a quick question for you. Given that the e-commerce industry is growing by the trillions year over year, have you ever dreamed of running your own e-commerce business like many of the guests we've interviewed on the show? But maybe you felt overwhelmed about where to begin? Lucky for you, today's sponsor Zendrop solves this exact problem. You see, with Zendrop, you simply select high-quality products, add them to your store, and they handle shipping and fulfillment while you make the profit. No more guessing games on product sourcing or dealing with inventory hassles. Zendrop's platform is designed with you in mind, making it incredibly simple to launch and scale your dropshipping business in a one-stop shop. Plus, they're offering an exclusive deal. Sign up today through our link below, and their team will personally craft your very own store to kickstart your e-commerce journey. They even have weekly coaching calls to answer all of your questions and help you get up and running in no time. It's truly more than just a platform. It's your e-commerce partner waiting to join you on the path to success. So why wait? It only takes 5 minutes or less to sign up. Simply hit pause, head over to zendrop.com/passion, and let's turn your passion for e-commerce into a thriving online business today. Thank you to Zendrop for sponsoring this video. Now let's get back to the show.
Are you telling these people that you're brokering it, or are you middlemaning it, or are you drop shipping it, or at that time, what was your plan?
So we always tried to not tell people that it was going to the government, because you don't know who is bidding on the contract. So you don't want to inform your competitors that there's another competitor out there. So
incognito a little bit.
Exactly. So we always try to keep that. Now sometimes they figure it out anyway, because especially if it's like an uncommon item, they'll be like, okay, the only people buying this specific quantity,
40,000 of these.
Yeah. I mean, we would usually one tactic we'd use is we'd change the quantity a bit, just to kind of disguise that we were doing that we were bidding on this contract. So instead of asking for 40,000 gallons of propane, we would ask for a quote for 50,000 gallons, or just slightly different, usually a little more, so they try to give you a better price. And that way they may not figure out that you're bidding on this contract, if they are bidding on the contract, which they aren't always. People think, oh, well, why does the government need you? Why don't they just go to the source? And the truth is that a lot of businesses don't want to do business with the government, because the government is kind of a pain in the butt to deal with. They have a lot of requirements, a lot of hoops you got to jump through, a lot of paperwork. They also pay you net 30, so they pay you 30 days after you deliver. Some businesses like to get paid in advance or get paid on delivery. So there's a lot of businesses that don't want to do business with the government, or they're just unaware of it.
Or assume there's barriers to entry, or have limiting beliefs, or it's too complicated.
Exactly. There's many reasons why plenty of suppliers aren't bidding directly to the government. Another reason is oftentimes the government will put out a solicitation that will have a bunch of different items on it, not just a single item. And there's no single manufacturer that makes all these items. So the only people who can really deliver this are middlemen, right? People who put the whole package together and arrange the logistics and figure out who's the best price for each of these separate items, who's the best combination, including logistics to the government. So so that's why there's room in this business
and
for
the government.
middlemen.
I love that you said earlier too that the government has a requirement that X amount % of business has to be from small businesses.
That's right.
So they can't go to so literally mom and pop businesses are mandatory to do business with.
Absolutely, and it's not just small businesses. They have, that's called a set aside, right? So they have on the solicitation, they'll have, not all contracts have this, but they have a requirement that certain percentage have to be different set asides. So one set aside is for small business. So the business has to be under a certain size. Other set asides are like for veteran-owned businesses, or for women-owned businesses, or for businesses that are located in an economically disadvantaged area, like a rural area. You know, there's a whole bunch of different set asides that you only qualify to bid on these contracts if you meet those criteria. So even if there's a large company that wants to do this business, sometimes they won't even qualify to bid on that. And that's where the opportunity for smaller players, middlemen, come in.
Right. That's awesome. So then Ephraim takes you under his wing, teaches you things, and then right away you jump on it. You get the propane deal. Was there a good profit in that, or what happens next that keeps you in the game?
So for that deal, we were splitting it 50-50, and I made about $8,000 on my end for about 2 to 3 weeks worth of work, which wasn't bad, and that was like the first contract. So the way it works is these days, the number is any contract under $250,000 total value does not require past performance. So you could be brand new to the game and win a $250,000 contract. And the profit margins vary a lot. So on the low end, it's usually like 5%. On the high end, it's 20%. Usually it's between that, but if you know your industry really well, you could make much higher profit margins. And so, I mean, there were some situations where we were making 50% profit margins because we knew that we had a really, really good deal. Particularly like when you're buying something from like a liquidator, for example, you know, someone who's selling it at below manufactured cost. You know that no one can beat you because the manufacturers have higher costs than this. So you can bid just above, you know, just under what you think the manufacturer is going to bid it at and make a massive profit margin. So there's opportunities for very large profit margins. So after the propane deal, I started working on a few other fuel deals because the idea was that we use that small deal as a past performance to go up the chain to get bigger and bigger deals, because once it's above 250K, you need to be able to prove that you've done this kind of work before. So I was bidding on bigger fuel contracts, and then he asked me, he's like, hey, you know, I have this gun parts contract that I won, but it's a lot of work to fulfill. It was it was like 130 different items of really rare gun parts. It was like historical items, because it was going to the special forces. The special forces need to train on pretty much every type of weapon systems out there, because when they're out in the field, they don't know what they're going to encounter, and they need to be able to use what they come across. So the special forces wanted to buy all these rare gun parts. And he knew the industry well enough that he bid it at a pretty high margin without even sourcing everything.
Wow.
You know? Ephraim. Yeah, because he knew that that most people are not going to be, this was going to be such a pain to deliver, they didn't even want that, there's going to be very little competition here. So he bid it at a very high price, ended up winning the contract. And then he's like, you know, I really don't want to put all the work into doing this, so why don't you work on this? He told me, you know, why don't you work on this, and you can make a decent amount of money from this, because they're very high margins. And so I started working on that. It took a while to deliver because that's pretty much call up every little gun shop in America, and there's like I think something like I forgot the exact numbers, like something like 70,000 of them, you know.
You're just
calling,
like imperfect
emailing,
brute forcing,
just brute force,
That's crazy.
I try to do as many emails as possible because that's easier, but emails aren't
so slow.
Sometimes they don't respond, and then you have to go back and hey, did you get my email? And you call them up, and if they don't have an email, you have to call them up, and if they don't answer the phone, you have to leave a message and then call them back, etc., etc. So it's a lot of like just grunt work, a lot of grind. It's pretty much if you're willing to grind, you can make a lot of money in this business, but a lot of people aren't willing to do that, which is why it keeps a lot of the competitors out because a lot of people just want easy money, and this is a lot of money, but it's not easy money. I would never say it's easy money. It's a grind. So I worked for a few months on that, made somewhere in the neighborhood of like I think it was something like 25 grand on that, and then I worked on a few things that I lost. It's very common to lose bids. You usually lose, it's very common to lose because it's like a casino. You don't know who your competitors are. You don't know what prices they're coming in at. You may be the only person bidding on the contract, and then you're obviously for sure going to win no matter what price you put there, but there may be 15 other people bidding on it who have way better prices than you, and you have no idea. So it's always a roll of the dice. It's just the nature of the business. So I bid on some contracts for SUVs to Pakistan that we lost. I bid on some food contracts that we lost. Some clothing contracts.
And how long does it take to put together a bid?
So it really depends on the complexity of the bid itself. For simple ones, not very long. I mean, you do need to read the solicitation document in full, which is usually between 30 to 40 pages. Now, once you read a bunch of these, you kind of get the feel of it, and you say, oh, this is boilerplate, that's boilerplate, oh, this is the important part, and then you can kind of get a lot faster at it. But in the beginning, you really have to slog through it. So you have to read the thing in full. You have to look up all the references that they have, because they'll, depending on the contract, they'll have like references to various requirements and laws. So for example, like with clothing, they have a requirement that certain percentage has to be made from fibers that was grown in the United States. Right? Like 50 or 60%. I forgot the exact numbers, and maybe
so it's just
different
nuances. Like
it's like, and if you don't follow them, you're going to lose, right? They're just not going to accept your proposal because these are the requirements. And it's all buried in there. So you have to read the thing in full, identify each aspect of the requirements, look up the things you don't understand, so you understand what the requirements are. If you can't find it on the internet, you have to contact the contracting officer, which is the government official who's in charge of this contract. They're in charge of awarding the contract, and they'll answer your questions as long as you can get them on the phone, which is not always easy, but there's ways of dealing with government contracting officials also that you learn along the way. So then of course you have to find all the suppliers, and that process really depends on how many items there are on the solicitation and how motivated you are to find every single supplier that there is. Right? So obviously the most successful government contractors will go down as many search results in Google as is relevant and find every single supplier that exists. And not all suppliers are in Google. You have to, some of them are in trade directories, some of them you can only get by getting referrals from people. So like whenever we would ask someone for a quote and they'd be like, oh, we don't do this kind of business, always ask, do you know anyone who does, right? And 4 out of 5 times they'll be like, no, sorry. But once in a while they'll be like, actually, I know a guy, here's a number, call him up. And sometimes those are the best suppliers because they're not listed necessarily publicly. You got a direct referral. We would also go to trade shows and meet people in person, exchange business cards, shake hands, that whole thing, make personal connections like that. So these are all the ways we would find suppliers. And once you would get all the suppliers, then you have to figure out the logistics, right? So if you're delivering an item to the government, then you have to figure out, well, where is it? Where does it need to go? Who's the best logistics provider? If it's a few different items, what's the best way to get all of them cheapest to the delivery point? And logistics is just like any other supplier. You need to contact a whole bunch of logistics companies and see who has the best price. So that's a whole other element.
So you got to bake all this into a thing, hopefully be right, and then maybe make a profit.
Exactly. And then you have to create a proposal to the government in the format that they require in the solicitation, which is why you needed to read that solicitation.
You're jumping through hoops in your
It's all hoops. It's a lot of hoops, which is why a lot of businesses don't want to do this, and they would rather, even if they know that you're supplying, that this is for a government contract, they'll be like, yeah, you take care of that. I don't care if you make a 10% margin on this. I'm making 20% and you save me all the trouble. Right. So a lot of businesses, they're fine with it, you know. Some businesses are not, and they want to bid directly, and then you kind of have to be careful around them, because you don't want to tip your hand of telling them that you're also bidding on it, or you know, because then they might be extra competitive if they know they have another competitor on this contract. You don't want them to be extra competitive because you want to beat them. So there's always that kind of like balancing act. So and then once you get all the suppliers and all the prices, you put it together with the proposal in the proper format, you submit it to the government, and then usually it takes them at least a few weeks to process all the submissions. Then they make an award notice. They have to post that on the website. So that's the only thing that's public in the whole process, is who wins the contract and what the winning bid was. So you could always see what the winning bid is on sam.gov. And you could look historically, like what did people win in the past for these kind of items.
So it gives some sort of a gauge.
It gives you a like a ballpark figure. It's not obviously it's not always going to be the same price. Could be more, could be less, depending on the market situation. But it does give you a broad idea of what the value of the contract is. You could look that historical data up.
And you guys are just slinging this together in your 20s. How do you guys go from winning that first contract with Ephraim for the guns, or for the special, like what was the profit on that deal? I think you said that was 25 a pop.
What, the gun parts?
The gun parts.
No, we were making like a good, like I think we were making about like 50% profit margins on that. He bid that high because he knew it was a big logistical nightmare to deliver. So we made a decent profit margin on that. And he had his own deals. Of course, he was running. I wasn't part of a lot of his deals because he was running his own stuff. He was delivering ammunition to Iraq, to the U.S. Army in Iraq.
At 19 years old.
Actually, at 17 was when he started.
Insane.
He started at 17.
So was it like a confidence thing that he had? Like, because I'm sure, like nowadays, you see it's very popular on social media for people to be younger and do bigger things. But in that era, because we're talking, how long ago was this?
This is like 2004, 2005 is when he started.
So we're talking almost 20 years ago.
Hey guys, quick question. Have you been enjoying this video, but you're thinking to yourself, man, I love this content, but I want to learn how to grow my brand or my business? Well, if your answer is yes, you're not alone. In fact, millions of entrepreneurs deal with this exact same issue. And it's something that I've learned the answer to from interviewing 7, 8, and 9-figure entrepreneurs around the world. And this philosophy that solves all that is a concept called who, not how. Now, the who, not how philosophy states that anytime you're stuck on the hows to get to the next level in your life, your brand, or your business, that there's always a who to help you get there. And it's for this exact reason that I'm super excited to announce that I've officially launched our brand new Passionate Few community to help you do exactly that. And yes, it's 100% free. Join me and the thousands of other entrepreneurs that can help you make your life, your business, and your dreams a reality. With no further ado, let's get back to the video.
Were you yourself shocked at how this 17-year-old kid, whereas most 17-year-olds are outside riding a bike, this guy's like supplying ammunition to Iraq on multi-million-dollar contracts?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, he's quite a special guy in a lot of different ways.
Was it intelligence, or was it a lot of the, like I know in the film they talk about the drug use and the weed and stuff. Was it a lot of naivete and just kind of being loose in the energy, trying things, or was it intelligence and brute force more so?
It's all of those things. It's all those things. I mean, he was, I always said that he's kind of an idiot savant. He's very, very smart in certain ways, and he's very dumb in other ways. Like like he was completely obsessed with business, right?
What about fears or?
And he was also fearless, right? So he was willing to take much bigger risks than a normal business professional would, and I think that had partially to do with why he won so many contracts. Like he would bid on contracts that he didn't have suppliers lined up for.
Just to see if they get a yes, then it'll pressure him to figure it out.
Exactly. And kind of like, just
like how a high school student waits last minute to get the assignment in, kind of thing.
Exactly. And I mean, like, or taking the test without studying. I mean, it get more like more similar to that. But yeah, I mean, he would take big risks that other businesses would not take. I guess he had also a lot less to lose. He didn't have any overhead. We were working out of his apartment, out of his living room, so it wasn't like he had a staff or shareholders or anything like that. It was just him, and he was just willing to. He had a very high risk tolerance. Very high risk tolerance.
So that rubs off on you. And then how does the big contract come about?
Right. So he saw, because he was focusing on munitions for most of his business, he saw this solicitation on SAM.gov. Back then it was called FBO.gov, Fed Biz Ops. They changed the name. I guess Uncle Sam, they like that name better. But so he saw the solicitation, and it was like it was all for Warsaw Pact munitions, right? So there's two major munitions types in the world. There's the West, which is NATO, the United States, Europe, and all our allies. And we use the M16 assault rifle, and 5.56 is the ammunition that goes in there. And then there's Warsaw Pact, which is the former Soviet Union and its allies. They use 7.62 by 39, which goes in the AK-47, and obviously they're not interchangeable. So. The Iraqi and Afghani armies were trained on Soviet weapons. And they also, a nice bonus, they also happen to be a lot cheaper than Western weapons. So the US Army, who was training the new Iraqi and Afghani armies that they were trying to build, decided to supply them with the weapon systems that they knew that also happened to save the US taxpayer a lot of money because it was a lot cheaper.
Right.
And so they put out the solicitation for a massive contract for like 30 different items, 30 different types of munitions, and it was all going to go to the Afghani National Army and Police. And it was all munitions, and it was everything. It wasn't weapons. It was just the stuff that goes into weapons. So it was everything from like pistol ammo all the way to machine gun, grenades, mortar rounds, tank rounds, and like anti-aircraft rockets. So it was like it spanned the whole arsenal.
Right.
And it was enormous numbers, like numbers we'd never seen in any solicitation before. There was like 1.1 million grenades, like 150 million rounds for assault rifle. I mean, it was just like massive numbers.
And you guys are just kids at the house smoking weed. So I trip out imagining the movie of it.
Yeah. And so he saw. I remember when he saw this solicitation. I was on the way.
1.1 million grenades.
Yeah, it was insane. Yeah. And so he saw the solicitation, and I was on the way to have dinner with my girlfriend at the time, and he calls me up, and he's like, David, you got to get back to the office right now. It's an emergency. Everything's an emergency with this guy. It's like he's always running a million miles an hour, and so I'm like, what's happening? What's happening? He's like, I just saw the biggest solicitation I've ever seen in my life. We got to go for this. It's perfect because we've all delivered this stuff before. We've delivered much smaller quantities, but we've delivered this stuff, so we qualify for this. We got to go for this. And I'm like, okay, cool. When's the solicitation due? And he's like, oh, it just came out. It's due in like a month and a half. So I'm like, okay, well, I mean, let's talk about this tomorrow. I'm on my way to have dinner with my girlfriend. And he's like, have dinner with your girlfriend? He's like, come on, man, you want to make some money or you want to get pussy? What are you like, come on, man, And I'm like, I already made plans with her. He's like, listen, yeah, she might be mad now, but like when you're making millions of dollars, she's gonna be sucking your dick. Don't worry about it. You know?
Yeah.
And I'm like, Ephraim, it's due in a month and a half. We'll talk about it tomorrow.
Yeah.
You know, and so he's like, oh, come on, fine. You know, so the next day we get together and we look at this, and he says to me, he's like, look, I have like connections in the arm industry, but like, you know, but this is going to take a lot more work than just my connections, because this is a massive, very varied quantity of different items. And so he's like, I'm going to get quotes from my guys, but I need you to go find every other person, every other company and entity in the entire world that makes these items. And you need to be obsessed with this. This is all you're working on now. And so I said, okay, fine. And we were up until this point, we were splitting everything 50-50 on the stuff that I would win, because I would do all the work and he would fund the contract, and he would also use his company, you know, to do the bidding for the government. So it was like, you know, that was like our split. He's like, but you know, he's like, I know we were doing 50% for everything else, but this is kind of my bread and butter. I already have a lot of connections for this contract. You're just going to be coming in with, you know, to fill in the gaps. So he's like, so for this, you know, I think it's fair to do 25%. So I said, oh, you know, it's going to be such a big contract. I'll make millions anyway. I'm like, fine, 25% is fine. Yeah. So I start working my ass off on this.
And how much before you start is your 25% profit, give or take? What was the plan for that?
What was it going to be?
Yeah, your profit on the 300 million.
So in the way it ended up being, we bid the contract at 9% profit margin. So it would have been around $30 million in profit, and I would have made personally with 30 divided by 4, right? So that's about 7.5. But after the contract, after we won the contract, we renegotiated with all our suppliers and figured out some better logistics options, and we got the total profit up to 20%.
Yeah.
So I was going to make $15 million on this in profit just for myself. So that's what I was set to make. So I scoured the internet. I went through all the trade directories. I went to a few trade shows.
And you're doing all this in the span of 30 days.
But it was a little under 2 months. It was a little under 2 months. That was the deadline. And yeah, I was pretty much, this was the only thing I was working on. I was working like 18-hour days. I was, you know, pretty much the second I woke up until the second I went to sleep, I was like Googling, calling, faxing. You know, a lot of these Eastern European companies, especially at that time, they didn't use email, and they only did fax. And a lot of their phone lines that they used the faxes over, that would fail like halfway through the fax because they had bad connections.
When you got to worry about language barriers, and customs, and cultures, and legal, and not saying too much. And,
exactly. And particularly the former Soviet Union countries, they don't have the Western concept of customer service.
Right.
They come from more of a culture of like, because communism, it didn't really matter whether you did a good job or not. It was just that you did the bare minimum, right? That's kind of how the whole system worked. So they kind of treat customers as if they're like annoying them, you know, like, oh, you're annoying me. So like I'd call people up and they'll be like, all right, fine, what do you want, you know? They're not jumping over themselves to help you. And they're
not trying to get a Yelp review.
They really didn't care. So I'd have to like get them. I'd have to get their attention. I'd have to get them to respond to me. I'd have to get the one guy in the organization who spoke a tiny bit of English. I'd have to get their fax number. I'd have to confirm they got the fax. I'd have to get them to remember to respond to the fax. There was a lot of follow-up. There's a lot of, you know, getting, you know, to pre-game, I guess you could call it, you know, before, and then a lot of follow-up to get everything, you know, from these people. So it was a lot of work, and of course they're on a completely different time zone, so I'd have to, you know, do that. And we were getting quotes from all over the world, so we had to deal with all the time zones. I mean, we were dealing with Eastern Europe, but also Central Asia, which has a lot of former communist countries. Also, we were talking to Korea and in the Philippines and like a lot of different countries. So because I mean a lot of the best prices come from when they have the items in stock, right? Not when they're doing. If the new manufacturing always costs a lot of money.
So you want overstock or excess or liquidation.
But if they've had this stuff lying in the warehouse for decades, they're happy to get rid of it at a very low price, and then you're very competitive because no manufacturer can beat those prices. So after about a month and a half, a little under 2 months of working my ass off, we had a really extensive spreadsheet with all the prices from all the different suppliers. And we submitted it to the government. And then we didn't hear anything from them for like 3 months. And we were like, okay, we definitely lost this thing. There's no way we won.
And you guys submit the bid for how much?
We submitted it for $299 million. It was just about that. Yeah, it was just under. It was, Ephraim was debating at first because he was like, oh, what profit margin should we put on this? We usually put about 10%, but he's like, but maybe our competitors are going to do a 10% profit margin, so maybe we should do 9%. He's like, but what if they're thinking that other people are doing 10%, so they do 9%? Maybe we should do 8%. And he was just like constantly like, he couldn't make up his mind. And I remember it was the last day, it was the submission deadline, and he could not make up his mind what profit margin to put on the contract. And I told him, Ephraim, if you don't make up your mind, it's going to be 0% because we're going to miss the deadline, and then we're not going to even qualify to bid on this thing. And eventually he's like, fine, I can't leave that much. I can't leave money on the table. We'll do 9%. I can't do 8%. It's too much money on the table. And so we put it into the spreadsheet. So usually you just email it to the government, but for this contract, for some reason, maybe because it was so big, I don't know, they required everything to be printed out on paper and mailed to them, physical hard copy. They also wanted a CD with like a spreadsheet on the CD. So we had to like print all the papers, like a stack of papers, and it was like already 4 p.m. The post office was going to close at 5, and the printer jammed, and we had to like, and then we ran out of ink, and like the clock was ticking, and we're like, oh shit, we're going to miss the deadline. And then we was like 10 minutes to 5, and we finally had all the papers printed out, and we get into his car, and he's like barreling down residential streets at like 70 miles an hour, like skids in front of the post office. And we're running up the stairs, and he sees the postal officer about to lock the door, and he like pushes the guy out of the way, and he's like, oh, I'm sorry, this is a matter of national security, we have to get this out today. And the guy's like, oh, you fucking asshole. And he's like, oh, I'm sorry, this is business of the federal government. And he sends it overnight, and so we just barely, literally by seconds, we made the submission deadline. And so we submitted it, and then like 3 months later they contact us, and they're like, we have to do a few audits of your company. And so we're like, holy crap, if they're only doing audits of our company if we're still in the running. For very large contracts, what they do is they have a few different investigations they do. So they want to do, they make you list all, because this is the government, this is not private business, so it's not like you have to worry about the government trying to circumvent you. The people working for the government are just making a straight salary. They're not, they're not going to
invested.
Exactly, it's not their money, right? So if they save money, they're not saving they're not making any money for themselves. They're just covering their asses. They're just trying not to get in trouble.
Checking the checklist.
Exactly, they got to check the check boxes off the list. So they required us to submit all our sources, telling them who we're going to buy from, where they're located, who we were going to use for our logistics. They wanted to know, they wanted to see our accounting system to make sure that we were keeping track of everything. They wanted to see that we had enough money to fund the contract. And so all of these things, it was like an extensive thing. And of course, some of these things we were a bit weak in. Ephraim never kept any books. He just did everything by the seat of his pants. And they wanted to see like a whole accounting system. So he hired a forensic accountant to to pretty much backdate his entire business for like 2 years. It took the guy like 2 weeks to do this. He went through every single deal he'd ever done and like put it into the accounting system and made it look like it had been put in beforehand, so that it looked legitimate. And he did a whole bunch of different
accountant, I like that.
Forensic accountant. And so they actually wanted to send a team of contracting officers to our office to inspect the facilities. Now, we didn't really have an office. We were just working out of his apartment. So we're like, oh shit, we got to get an office. So we quickly rented an office. We bought a bunch of furniture. We hired some like random people from Craigslist to like look official. And they sent like, it was like a group of like 4 like older ladies who came to the office. They're all ladies for some reason. And Ephraim is super charming, like in real life. You know, he's very funny. You know, I mean, he's a total sociopath, but he's very funny. And I remember when the ladies the contracting officers come into the office, he's like, ladies, over the phone, I couldn't tell how beautiful you were. I mean, if it wasn't completely illegal, I'd be buying all you diamonds right now. And so, they laughed. They thought he was super charming. And they gave us very high marks. They were very impressed with our operation that we had set up literally days before.
And you just put like AEY on the walls?
Exactly. We just had like a little sign, and we had like a girl like as a receptionist in the front. She'd literally have been hired a few days before.
So this whole thing is just staged.
Exactly. It was all staged.
And is part of you thinking, holy shit, like I'm about to do a $300 million deal? Like, what is going through your head while you guys are in process? Like, this guy's nuts. How am I doing this?
I mean,
or this could work.
I mean, both. I mean, I knew he was nuts, right? I mean, for a bunch of other experiences. But I don't know how much you want to get into that stuff. But I knew he was nuts, but I also knew that he pulled things off. Right. So he's making millions of dollars, right? So if he could pull off those things,
why not this?
Why not this? I mean, this was like literally 20, 25 times bigger than anything he'd ever done. But the proof of concept was there. So I thought that there was a possibility we could win, but I still didn't really believe it, you know, because I'm like, are they really going to give us a $300 million contract? Are they going to go with General Dynamics at the end of the day? You know, at the end of the day, they're probably going to go with the company that's been around for 100 years and has a staff of 100 you know, working on this particular contract.
So when they come into the office, it's just you, Ephraim, and like 4 employees that are staged?
Exactly. And we had our filing cabinets that the forensic accountant had filled up with all our records. It was literally just built right there. I mean, we ended up, once we won the contract, we kept the office, and then we started hiring people, and then we actually had a real staff. I think at our peak, we had about 15 people working for us.
So then what happens the day that they come, they check it out, give you guys high marks, they head out, what happens next?
So then we didn't hear from them for like another month and a half. And we're like, okay, we failed it. You know, there's no way they're going to give this to us. And then in like, I think it was in like early mid-January of 2007, Ephraim calls me up and he's like, I've got good news and I've got bad news. And I say, well, what's the bad news? And he says, well, our first task order is only $600K. And I'm like, we won the contract? And he's like, fuck yeah, motherfucker, I'm picking you up, we're going to celebrate. And so what a task order is when they give you a massive contract, they don't give you an order for $300 million. They split it into like little orders, right, called task orders. And they're only legally required to give you the first task order. Even though you bid on a $300 million contract, they aren't required to order the whole thing. They're only required to order the first one. And that can be any amount. Right? So we obviously bid it on the assumption that we would be delivering the entire $300 million amount. And we, and our logistics in particular, the price of air freight goes down drastically when you're hiring several hundred aircraft rather than one. So we bid on the assumption that we were going to deliver on the entire amount. And of course, our air freight costs in particular reflected that. So if they were only going to give us a $600,000 order, which wasn't even enough to fill one aircraft,
right? Yeah,
we were going to lose a lot of money on that.
So you had to call aircraft carriers to like actually hold all the cargo, right? Because it was multiple trips.
Oh, I mean, it was, I think in total, it was going to be something like 150 or 200 aircraft loads.
Back and forth.
Yeah.
Wow.
Exactly. Yeah, at 45 tons each.
And you're negotiating the whole contract with 300 million based on that, but now you guys run into a financial pinch.
Yeah, so we only had the order for 600K, which wasn't even enough to fill up one aircraft. So we're like, what should we do? Should we, maybe this is a test. Maybe they're going to see if we can deliver this. And once we deliver this, then they're going to give us the rest. That's what we thought. And so we were kind of like freaking out. We're like, do we need to lose money on this first task order in order to get the rest? But then about a week and a half later, they gave us a $40 million task order. So we're like, okay, they were just waiting for the money to transfer. Yeah. They were just waiting for the money to come in. They were just using the 600K as a placeholder.
Yeah.
So then we're like, okay, we're good on this. They're definitely giving us massive orders here. This is serious.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so we start to deliver on the contract.
And to work it out, so they pay you, let's say for that second task order, they pay you the 40 million, net 30 after delivery.
Yeah.
So you just negotiate with the manufacturers or suppliers against it from like a net 60 or net 90, for example, right?
Right.
Just to cover.
No manufacturer, particularly arms manufacturer, will give you terms. It just never happens.
Gotcha.
Right? They will never give you terms.
Yeah.
Most international companies in general won't give you terms. Credit, right, is usually something that only American companies give each other, and that's if you pass their credit check,
right.
etc. So we were going to have to pay in full before the aircraft left the runway.
Wow.
So so obviously we didn't have $40 million to wait to fund it and to wait 30 days for the government to pay us. So what we did was we had so the government pays you upon each delivery, right? So even if it's a $40 million task order, that's split amongst, let's just say, 40 aircraft, right? Then each time the aircraft lands, you submit your certificate of conformance, which is a document that states the stuff that's on the aircraft. The government reviews that, they inspect the goods, they sign their DD-250 form, which is their receiving form, to confirm that that the stuff they receive matches what you claim to have delivered, and then they submit it to the payment department, and then 30 days later you get paid for that aircraft delivery, for that delivery, right?
Gotcha.
So what we did was we got what they call a factoring agreement with Wells Fargo. And Wells Fargo would pay us as soon as they got the signed DD-250 form from the government. So as soon as they got that document that the government confirmed they received it, and obviously you're going to get paid by the government. It's not like they're going to decide to screw you. You know, they already confirmed they got the stuff, and they're not going to run out of money. They print the money, right?
Right.
So it's a very safe investment for Wells Fargo to just pretty much fund that gap. And so we would submit that receiving form to the to Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo would give us the money immediately, minus like 0.5% or something, or percent.
So they fronted the 40 million for the
Exactly, and they'd give us the money immediately, and then we could give that money to our suppliers for the next aircraft load, and that's how we rolled it.
You guys pay and get profit on the back end of the whole thing.
Well, we would get, the profit was built into it.
Right.
So we were just kind of collecting money, but we needed money to finance the contract, so we weren't pulling money out of the company. In fact, I wasn't pulling any money out of the company the entire time, because every time we'd win a contract, I'd make a bunch of money. I was already in the process of winning another one, and Efrain would be like, "Oh, we need financing. You just made a bunch of money. Let's use your money. I'm funding it with my money. Why don't you fund it with your money?" So I was living off my 100K of savings this entire time, was dwindling down.
Right.
I wasn't getting paid a salary or anything like that. So we were getting financed by Wells Fargo, so we'd roll the money into the next aircraft load. And we started delivering on a regular basis. The grenades were by far the most profitable. I think we had like a 25%, 30% profit margin on that.
And they were 1.1 million grenades?
1.1 million grenades. Yeah,
wow.
Yeah. They were. I think there were two different types of grenades. One was like regular high explosive. The other one was smoke grenade. The high explosive was like $25 each. The smoke was $30 each. And this is for a quantity of 1 million,
right,
1.1 million. I'm sure it'd be a lot more expensive at lower quantities.
Yeah.
And so we were delivering the grenades, and then, but at the time, there was a massive spike in oil prices. This was like early 2007, like February, March. And with the massive spike in oil prices, air freight costs, like 80% of the cost is oil, is the fuel. So our air freight costs shot up. Now, what a normal company would have done, like General Dynamics, they would have bought, they would have hedged, right? They would have bought like futures on the oil just in case this happened, that they would not lose money here. But Ephraim didn't play like that. He didn't buy insurance. He played everything by the seat of his pants. So we were like, we're kind of screwed. We can't deliver for the lower value items. So the grenades we could still deliver because the profit margin was so high and the value to the weight ratio was so high. So you know, on one aircraft you can fit like, I think it was like 100,000 grenades. So it's like $2.5 million worth of grenades, and we're making, you know, quite a few $100,000 on that. So and the aircraft cost like even with the spike in oil prices, about 130 grand per flight. So we still had plenty of room to deliver the grenades, but the 7.62x39 ammo was much lower value. It could only fit about around like 300K worth of the ammo on the aircraft. So, and we were making like a 10%, about 10-15% profit margin on that. So there wasn't room for that extra increase in fuel costs. So we're like, we are going to lose money on this item unless we figure something out. So we looked into shipping by ocean, but Afghanistan is a landlocked country, and if we do by ocean, it'd have to go to like Karachi in Pakistan and then get transferred overland through like lawless areas that are run by warlords who would love nothing more than to, you know, take a enormous shipment of ammunition for themselves.
And I keep saying it, but I'm tripping that you guys are negotiating like stuff with like the, you know, like 1 million rounds of ammunition, and you guys are kids in your 20s. Like, when the average kid is like trying to figure out how to get a side hustle going. You know? That's incredible. That's incredible.
It was pretty surreal. I mean,
so you're calling these governments and the freights in Pakistan and Karachi, and you go, well, what about by boat freight? And no experience, just by the seat of your pants.
Seat of our pants. Kind of learning on the fly. We tried to do it by rail through Russia, but Russia was not on good terms with the United States at the time because they had just supplied Iran with some nuclear technology and got themselves on a blacklist, and they weren't happy about being put on the blacklist, so they refused to do logistics for us. And so anyway, I realized, I told Ephraim, like, you know, because we got pictures of the AK-47 ammo, the 7.62x39, and I realized, you know, this stuff is packed in, the way the ammo was packed, it was packed in these, what they call sardine cans, which are these metal tins that are vacuum sealed. And then the metal tins were placed into these thick wooden crates. And the wooden crates, I mean, they look hefty, right? So I said, well, you know, we don't really need the wooden crates, right? The Army isn't paying us for the wood, right? They're paying us for the ammo. So we could just get rid of the wooden crates and we'll probably save a bunch of weight. And maybe that'll put us back into profitability. And he said, yeah, that's a great idea. We got to find out what those wooden crates weigh. So I told him, well, okay, I'll ask the Albanians what they weigh. He's like, no. You can't trust the Albanians. They're a bunch of scumbags, you know? We can't trust them. We need to send someone over there to test it. And if we're gonna like be changing the packaging, this is gonna be a whole job. We need someone on the ground. He tells me, he's like, David, you know, you're dealing with a whole bunch of different suppliers and with the government, and you're managing this thing, because he was trying to go for other contracts, you know, and so he was pretty much leaving the management of most of the Afghan contract to me. he's like, I need you in the office. I need you here. Why don't we send? I had one of my best friends. His name was Alex, and he had just done a stint in the French military. He had a degree in international relations. He spoke a few languages, so he's a pretty experienced, smart guy. And so he's like, why don't we send Alex? He'll do this whole thing. So we send Alex over to Albania. Alex does the inspection. He weighs the crates. The crates turned out to weigh a shit ton, and getting rid of them was going to put us back into profitability, even with the higher air freight costs. And Alex calls me up, and he's like, yeah, I weighed the crates. He's like, but you do know this ammo is Chinese, right? And I'm like, what are you talking about? It's Albanian. He's like, no, there's Chinese markings all over the crates, all over the tins. And there's even documents in Chinese inside the tins with the ammo. And I told him, are you sure about that? He's like, I know what Chinese looks like. It's absolutely Chinese. And I told Ephraim, and Ephraim's like, oh fuck, we're fucked, because our contract specifically said no Chinese ammunition could be delivered directly or indirectly under this contract. And we knew that, bidding on it. We didn't know that the ammunition in Albania was Chinese.
Right.
And the reason it was Chinese is because Albania had made an alliance with China, and had gotten, during the Cold War, they pulled out of their alliance with the Soviet Union and decided, because the dictator thought that the Soviet Union was corrupt and thought that Chairman Mao was a true communist, so made an alliance with China, and so China supplied Albania with a massive amount of weapons and ammunition. And we, of course, did not know the history of Albania at the time. So
it slipped through the cracks, that nuance of like the source of the bullets or the ammunition.
Yeah, I mean, we did not know that when we bid the contract, we just bid it. We thought it was by far the best price out of Albania, and for good reason, right? Also, Albania was trying to join NATO at the time, and so one of NATO's requirements was that they get rid of all their Warsaw Pact munitions. So they were going to have to pay to get it dismantled, unless they sold it.
Wow.
So they were like willing to pretty much accept anything, because otherwise they're losing money instead of making money. So so we got a really, really good deal. It was done for us through a Swiss arms dealer named Henry. In the movie, he's played by Bradley Cooper. Doesn't look anything like Bradley Cooper. Bradley Cooper looks really rough in the movie. He's got like those thick glasses and unshaven face. In real life, Henry was very clean cut. He actually looked like a Swiss banker. Very, very clean cut, perfectly done hair, nice suit, never raised his voice, very calm guy. So Henry was very close with the Albanian government. I think he was like friends with the Albanian prime minister's son or something like that. And so Henry just gave us the price 4 cents a round, which was by far cheaper than anyone else. And we just thought it was just normal ammo. We didn't realize that it was Chinese ammo. So in our contract, it said that we couldn't deliver Chinese ammo because the United States placed an arms embargo against China in 1989 after the Tiananmen Square massacre, where a bunch of Chinese students were protesting for democracy in the central square of Beijing, in Tiananmen Square, and the Chinese government brought in tanks and soldiers and pretty much killed everybody, and it was a enormous political scandal. It was on national television. People saw this in 1989, and so the United States put China in an arms embargo, so that it's illegal for U.S. companies and citizens to do military business with the Chinese. So, but our contract didn't mention the embargo. It just said no Chinese ammunition could be delivered directly or indirectly. And the ammunition that was in Albania was actually given to Albania in the 70s, way before the arms embargo. So that ammo did not violate the arms embargo. It's because it was exported from China while it was legal, so it remains legal, right?
How relieved were you when you found out that nuance?
Well, not completely relieved, because our contract still said that we couldn't deliver Chinese ammo. So at the time we were debating, we were thinking, well, doesn't violate the arms embargo, but it does violate the terms of our contract. So maybe we can tell the Army, hey guys, we know you meant this in reference to the arms embargo. This doesn't violate the arms embargo. Can you give us a waiver? You know, can you alter the terms of the contract so that it's only in reference to the arms embargo? And we thought to ourselves, well, possible that they'll give us a waiver. In retrospect, they probably would have, because it turned out later that they knew the whole time that it was Chinese and they didn't care. This came out in court.
Wow.
Yeah, but at the time we didn't know that they knew. So we thought maybe they would say something like, you know, General Dynamics was very upset that you guys won this contract and they bid it properly according to the terms of the solicitation. So it's not really fair that we changed this contract after the fact to allow you to deliver this ammo. So we're going to take this $300 million contract away from you and put it out for open bid, and you're welcome to bid on it again, as long as you do it properly this time.
Yeah.
And we thought that might be what would happen. And we're like, oh, we don't really want to risk losing a $300 million contract.
Right, yeah.
And so we decided to make the fateful decision of not telling them about it and hiding it. So Ephraim's...
Do you remember the day you guys made that decision, or the day you guys were discussing?
I remember we were in my apartment so Ephraim and I lived in the same building.
Yeah.
And it was actually in the Flamingo in South Beach, for people who know Miami. It's a pretty famous complex. Not as nice as what they show in the movie. That building wasn't even built at the time this story took place. It's actually funny, I bumped into the guy who bought that specific apartment that is shown in the movie. Yeah, he has a podcast actually, and I was on his podcast in that apartment. It was pretty cool. Yeah, it's pretty cool. I think it's called The Offer Vault is the name of the podcast. So anyway, shout out to The Offer Vault. To Ringba, that's his company. Yeah. Anyway, it doesn't matter. So we were living in the same building, and he came over to my apartment to discuss. And we were like, kind of like working through the scenarios of like what the possibilities are and what the potential ramifications are and like what the risks are.
Because you're talking about potentially defrauding the federal government of a $300 million contract. Like, in one unaccidental move, you could look like the worst guy ever on paper.
Right. I mean, we were discussing violating the terms of our contract.
Yeah.
Now, we weren't completely sure whether it was just a civil issue, like a breach of contract, which is just civil and you could get sued, but you're not going to go to prison, right? Or if it's a criminal thing and you can go to prison for that. We weren't sure. And so Ephraim actually sent an email to the State Department. He didn't want to tip his hand of what we were actually talking about. So he asked them, is there a provision in the law that if a restricted ammunition was in a third-party country for more than 5 years, that would become unrestricted ammunition? That's what he wanted to know, whether it was in Albania long enough. But he didn't want to give them enough details that they could actually figure out what he's asking. In reality, and they wrote back to him, there is no such provision in the law. And so we're like, okay, well, in that case, maybe we can't do this, legally. And so, so he decided that we were going to not tell them about it, and that we were, in order so that they wouldn't find out, we're going to repackage all the ammunition to get rid of all the Chinese markings.
Yeah.
And he told me, he's like, listen, we're only talking about this over the phone, no emails, no text messages.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, that's probably a good idea. And then we were going through various ways of doing the whole repackaging situation, and we were all working 18-hour days, and everyone was on a different time zone. And at some point, I think it was Ralph, who was our investor. In the movie, he's played by this Jewish laundromat owner. In reality, he was not Jewish. He was actually Mormon, and he owned a machine gun factory, not a laundromat. So, his name was Ralph. That part's true. Different last name, but he was Ephraim's investor. He actually funded Ephraim's first contract when Ephraim won his first contract. So he'd been funding him the whole time. And so Ralph at one point sent an email with step-by-step instructions of how to use a electric sander to get rid of Chinese markings from wooden crates. And he had pictures of how it would look like and what the steps you need to take. And it had like a whole step-by-step how to get rid of Chinese markings off wooden crates. And then everyone was like, okay, well, the cat's out of the bag. It's already on email. So then we just started discussing it openly on email. And that was our downfall. Because once it's an email or text, it's there forever.
Yeah.
And that's all the evidence they need to prove everything that you've done.
Were you scared the day you guys decided that? I know
Oh, absolutely. I was
Ephraim made that decision. Were you worried about like, holy shit, I could be in jail? I could either be like a multi-millionaire set, or I could be in jail.
That was going through my mind. I was terrified. I was absolutely terrified.
And you can't tell anybody.
Yeah, exactly.
So you just have to hold it in.
You just got to hold it in and pray for the best. Knock on wood and all that. It was very, very scary. But you know, I just hoped it was the right decision. Turned out to be the wrong one, but that's how it goes. So anyway, Alex finds a cardboard box manufacturer in Albania, a guy named Costa, and to supply the boxes, and he asked Costa, he's like, oh, you have a factory with workers, can you also supply labor to do this repackaging operation? Costa said, sure, no problem. I think he charged us like about $100,000 for the whole thing, including the boxes, and we were going to save, I think, about $3 million in shipping costs, so it was a great deal. And he starts doing the repackaging. And we start delivering this ammunition to Afghanistan, and the receiving officer in Afghanistan is thrilled because they were running out of ammo like pretty fast. Afghanistan has a fighting season because they can't fight during the winter because of there's really tall mountains, and all the mountain passes get filled with snow, so they only fight during the spring and summertime. And it was already kind of getting into springtime, and our Afghan allies were running out of ammo, and the army was yelling at us, you got to deliver, you know, the mission is critical. You know? So the army was thrilled that we were delivering, and we started delivering 3 to 4 aircraft loads every week. Like every other day we had another aircraft, 45 tons on an IL-76.
So you're spending almost $500,000 a week on just flights.
Yeah, exactly. But the money was rolling back, you know, so the money was rolling back in. And you know, we were starting to make millions of dollars here. And then Ephraim, of course, you know, in Ephraim's mind, there's never enough. There's no such thing as enough, right? So he was like, you know, I wonder what Henry's making on this deal. And he calls up Costa, and he asks Costa, he's like, Costa, do you know anyone who works in the Albanian Ministry of Defense? And Costa says, yeah, I actually have a cousin who works there. It's a very small country. And so he's like, can you find out from your cousin what the Albanian MOD is getting paid for our ammo? And Costa says, sure, I'll look into it. A few days later, he comes back. He's like, yeah, my cousin told me they're getting paid 2 cents a round. And we were paying Henry 4 cents a round. And that infuriated Ephraim. He's like, that motherfucker, he's doubling his money. He's making so much money. And I'm like, Ephraim, we're selling it for 10.5 cents a round. You know? We are spending about 5 cents a round in shipping, but we're still clearing like, you know, 1.5 cents. So we're making almost as much as Henry. And so he's like, yeah, but it doesn't matter. This is our contract. We're taking all the risk. All, you know, with the Chinese, he didn't tell us about that Chinese ammo, that piece of shit. He's like, I want to cut this cocksucker out of this deal. And I told him, Ephraim, why don't we not? Everything's going good. You know, why don't you just leave it alone? This isn't even the most profitable part of the contract. This is like 10% of the contract. This ammo. We're making way more money on the grenades and on the anti-aircraft rockets and the mortars and everything. It's like, just leave it alone. It's going. You know, the Army's happy, everyone's happy. And he's like, no, man, like, we're getting rid of this fucker. I don't give a shit, you know? And he's like, I'm going to Albania, and I'm going to negotiate with the Albanians directly. And so I'm like, well, you know, it's your company. And so he says to me, he's like, this is what I want you to do. I want you to take all those quotes that we got for this ammo from all our other suppliers, and I want you to change the prices on it, doctor the quotes. So it looks like we have way better prices than what the Albanians are offering us. And I'm going to show that those quotes and tell them, hey, if you don't give me a better price, I'm gonna, go with these other guys, right? So I'm like, okay, fine. It's just a bunch of PDFs. I use some basic PDF editing software, change the numbers to what he wanted, print it out, give it to him. He flies to Albania. He meets with Yili Pinari, who's the head of the Albanian export company in charge of this business. It's like a partially government-owned
and again, this kid's like Ephraim's 19, 20 at this time.
At this time, he was 21.
Okay.
At this time, he was 21.
Yeah.
And he meets with this with Yili Pinari, and he's like he shows him Alex told me this later because Alex was with him when he met with Pinari, and Alex told me, he's like, yeah, he showed him the papers, and Pinari looked at it and he's like, don't show me your fake documents.
Yeah.
He knew right away. He's like, don't pull that shit on me. He's like, I know the industry. I know we got the lowest price. There's no one who can beat us on this price.
Yeah.
This is ridiculous. And Ephraim wouldn't leave him alone, kept on hounding him for a few days. You need to give me a better price. I promise we're going to do so much more business in the future. I have all these other contracts that are coming. You're going to make so much more money on these other things. But like if I don't get a better price, I'm going to go bankrupt, and then we won't be able to do any business. And giving him every excuse in the book. And finally, Yili says, look, I know you want. I'll tell you what. I'll make a meeting with you and the guy who could actually make this decision. Right? Mm-hmm. He makes a meeting. They go into like this construction site of this like skyscraper that was under construction. They go into the under construction building. Everything's dusty and nasty, and they open up a door, and then there's this like beautiful, like perfectly furnished office that looks straight out of Wall Street. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the table is this really hard-looking guy, a guy named Mikhail. I think his name was Mikhail Diliorgi. That's his name, Mikhail Diliorgi. We didn't know this at the time, but he turned out to be the head of the Albanian mob.
Wow.
Who was somehow involved with this deal, right? the mob and the politicians in Albania, they kind of like
rub elbows.
Yeah, they rub elbows. And so Alex told me that Ephraim's a big talker, always loud, always joking around. He said as soon as he saw this guy, he got really quiet because he knew he couldn't like fuck with this guy.
Yeah.
And so Diliorgi tells Ephraim, he's like, look, I know you want a better deal on the ammo. I can't give you a better deal on the ammo. You already have a really good deal. But I'll tell you what, I know that you hired this other guy, Costa, to do this repackaging of this ammunition. You're paying him some money for that. Why don't you give us the job to do the repackaging, and then I can give you a little discount on the ammo because I'm making more money with this other job. And Ephraim said, yeah, that's a great idea. That guy's fired. You're hired. Let's do this. Mm-hmm. And it turned out the Diliorgi used the Albanian military to do all the repackaging, so he didn't even have to pay them anything, so he was just making all that money. But according to Alex, the military did a much better job repackaging than Costa's employees. So as far as Alex was concerned, it was an improvement because he had to manage everybody. Mm-hmm. But anyway,
and Alex is the friend you guys sent there to kind of be on
exactly.
the ground.
Yeah. Alex was the guy we sent there. And we grew up together. We all grew up together. We're all like kids together in Miami Beach. So Ephraim flies back from Albania to Miami, and Costa calls me up. And he says, he's like, look, I just found out that you guys are replacing me on the packaging job. I understand it's just business, everyone does what's good for their business. He's like, but, I've got $20,000 worth of boxes that I manufactured just for you guys, right? Mm-hmm. I don't really use these type of boxes in any other aspect of my business. So why don't you guys just buy these boxes from me? You're gonna need them anyway. And and then we'll part ways. Mm-hmm. And I said, yeah, that's a great idea. I tell Ephraim, hey, Costa has these boxes. Why don't we get the new guys to buy the boxes? And Ephraim's like, yeah, I'll get the new guys to buy the boxes. Mm-hmm. A few days later, Costa calls me up. He's like, "What's going on with the boxes? I haven't been paid for it." And I ask Ephraim, and Ephraim's like, "Yeah, I talked to the new guys, and they say they already got their boxes, so they don't want to deal with him. So just let this guy go. Just ignore him." And I told him, Ephraim, why don't we just pay him the 20 grand anyway, you know, because he knows everything. Yeah. And Ephraim's like, nah, he's not, what's he gonna do? You know, what's he gonna do? He's not gonna do anything, you know? Just fuck him, let him go, you know? That's his problem, not our problem. And I told him, like, I think that's a really bad idea, Ephraim. You know, that's he knows everything. You know, he can really fuck us over. It's just 20 grand, just pay him. Yeah. You know, I didn't have I was starting to run out of money. You know, I was still waiting for my payday. So it's not like I could have paid him. Not that I should have. You know, it was Ephraim's business. I mean, in retrospect, I should have. But you know, maybe things would have gone better. But or maybe not. But anyway, so I pretty much just stopped taking Costa's calls as Ephraim instructed me, and Costa, we found out later, got really upset at that, and he decided to call up the New York Times and tell them everything that we were doing, and he called up the FBI and told them what we were doing.
Oh my God!
And his biggest mistake was he called up the local Albanian press. And told them that the Albanian politicians were getting kickbacks from this contract. Wow. And 1 week after those articles were published, Costa wound up dead in a very mysterious car accident. He was in an empty field on a dirt road. There's no one else around, and somehow he'd been run over by his own car. They found him face down in the dirt. So yeah, probably. If I had to guess, Deli Yorgi took care of him. And so anyway, there's a little bit after that time, Ephraim comes into my office, after we had about 15 employees at this time.
And you guys had no idea that the news was going to break on any of this stuff?
No, we didn't know. We didn't know that he told them. We only found that out later.
Do you remember the day you woke up to articles or the news or the Times or anything?
I think it was March 28th, 2008. Yeah, that was when the New York Times published their article.
Shit hit the fan.
Exactly. Yeah. But before that happened, let me not get ahead of myself.
No worries.
So Ephraim walks into my office. This was like a little bit after the whole Costa thing happened. And things were going well. Like, we were delivering 4 aircraft loads a week, and the money was rolling in. Everything was pretty much on autopilot. I was just pretty much overseeing that all the documents were being submitted at the right time and everything. And things were just running like clockwork now, which was unusual, right? I mean, we were used to
chaos.
To chaos and running and working 18-hour days and everything being an emergency, and that was kind of like what everything was until this point. But now things were starting to kind of settle into a clockwork operation. And so, I started to relax a little, start to take a little time off, start to work out in the gym again. I didn't spend every waking hour I had in the day at the office. And so Ephraim comes into my office at the end of the day after all the other employees had left, and he says to me, he's like, David, a lot of the guys around the office, they're saying you're not pulling your weight around here anymore. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, yeah, you're leaving early, you're not working as long as you used to. I'm like, yeah, I mean, I don't have to. Everything's running well. What's the problem? The Afghan contract is going like clockwork. And he's like, yeah, the Afghan contract's going like clockwork, but we're really struggling on these other Iraq contracts that we have, and you're not helping with those. I said, well, I mean, I'm not part of those contracts. I work on a commission-only basis. I'm not one of your employees. You want to give me a piece of those contracts? I'll work on them. He's like, oh, don't be ridiculous. You didn't help us win those contracts. Why should you get a piece of them? I'm like, then why do you want me to work on it? And he's like, well, if we fail on those contracts, the whole company could go down, and that takes your Afghan contract with it. So you need to work on everything. So I'm like, well, in that case, you want to give me a piece of the whole company? And he says, well, I've been thinking a lot about this, and I own 100% of AEY, and I always intended to keep it that way. I would never give a piece of my company to anyone else, but David, you're my best friend, and your hard work is a big reason why we've reached the level of success we have today. So I'll tell you what, I'm going to give you a very generous $100,000 a year executive salary as my vice president, and 1% of the company. And I said to him, well, the Afghan contract's going to make us like 90% of all the money for the next 2 years at least.
Yeah.
And I'm supposed to get 25% of that.
Yeah.
So I think I'll stick with 25 of the Afghan contract instead of 1% of the company.
Yeah, and 100 grand.
Yeah. And 100 grand, I mean, I was supposed to make like $15 million here. It was 100 grand going to do for me, you know? And he says, well, how about 0? Because that's the only offer on the table. Take it or leave it.
Wow.
And
so point blank, he just comes at you with that one?
Yep. And I said, well, in that case, go fuck yourself and I'll see you in court.
Yeah.
And I walked out, and that was my last day at AEY.
Holy shit.
Yeah. And then I went into like a good 2 weeks of depression because I was about to go, I was really running out of money. I hadn't been paid this entire time. And I went from like, I'm about to make $15 million to I'm about to fucking not be able to make rent.
Yeah.
And my daughter was about 6 months old at this time.
Oh, so you had a daughter on top of this whole thing.
Yeah.
Wow.
So my daughter was actually born just 2 weeks after we won the contract.
Wow.
Yeah. I remember when my girlfriend got pregnant. This was while we were working on the contract. Ephraim told me he's like, you want to be able to feed your kid, right? You better work on this.
Yeah.
So I was like, yeah, I better work on this. Yeah. So I had a lot of motivation.
So then Ephraim just point blank one day comes into the office, offers you that, and he's trying to cut you out now that you guys are approaching the finish line.
Yeah, exactly. Now that he didn't need me anymore, because he had a staff of 15 people who could very easily do the little administrative things that I was doing at the time. Just paperwork shuffling pretty much because everything was running smoothly. And he's like, I could have a guy I'm paying like 60 grand a year do this job. Why am I paying this guy 15 million?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so of course he thinks of that in retrospect. I mean, the whole point was that I wasn't getting paid a salary, and I was working for 0 on the contingency. And of course, that's how contingencies work.
Yeah.
Is that you get a high payoff if it pays off.
Yeah.
Right? But of course, he didn't want to give me that money. So pretty much he told me, I'm not going to pay you unless you take this tiny little nothing that he was offering me.
Yeah.
And so I walked out. And then after about 2 weeks of being super depressed, I realized, hey, I know this business. I have all the connections. I have even some connections that Ephraim doesn't have because I went to some trade shows without him. And I could start my own company and do this. So I started my own company, registered it with the government, started bidding on contracts, but I was still very low on money. And so my lawyer, who I was hired to sue him, said, look, you can sue him, and obviously you're in the right. So you'll probably win at some point, but it's probably going to take you a few years to win. And even if you win, you're going to have to chase him for the money because you know this guy. I knew he had like offshore accounts in the Seychelles Islands at the time. So like I knew he had ways of hiding his money. So even if I won, collecting was going to be a whole thing.
Right.
So there's no guarantee there. So my lawyer's like, why don't you just negotiate something? It'll be way less than what he owes you, but
it's faster, smoother.
It's faster, smoother. It'll take care of your current immediate problem of you about to be bankrupt.
Right.
So we negotiated, eventually settled on, I think it was like $300K, which was a tiny fraction of what at the time we had delivered enough that he owed me about $5 million. And so 300K was pitiful, but that would last me for a couple of years to support my kid and to get my new business off the ground, and I wouldn't have to chase him in court for years. Yeah. So I was like, you know what? I want this guy out of my life. I'm just gonna take the money and chalk it up to I learned a lot. Yeah. I got an education. I can do this business on my own, and 300K will
fund the runway.
It'll fund the runway.
Yeah.
So we were about to sign. We set a date to sign the agreement. The day that it was August 23rd, 2006. 2007. August 23rd, 2007 was the day that we were supposed to sign the agreement. Literally that morning, I get a call from the secretary in the office, and I was on good terms with all the staff. You know, I was the nice boss. You know, that he would walk into the office screaming, "I don't pay you motherfuckers to talk to each other. Get back on your computers and make me some fucking money." You know, that's the kind of guy he was. So, you know, I treat everyone nicely. So everyone, you know, kind of hated him. But so the secretary calls me up and she's like, "Hey, David, I just wanted to let you know, the federal agents just raided the office, and they had us leave they had us step away from our computers, and they're boxing up all the documents, all the filing cabinets, and they're taking all our computers." And I'm like, "Oh crap, we're fucked." You know, they know about everything. You know, we're fucked. So I call up Alex, and I tell him, "Hey, you know, I just heard that the office got raided," because he was still in Albania.
I just came and raided.
Yeah, exactly. It was actually Customs who ended up doing the NDCIS, who is the Defense Criminal Investigative Service, which is the Pentagon's internal FBI, you know, the Justice Department, whatever they call it. So anyway, so I tell Alex, you know, that the feds just raided the office, and he says, he's like, why would they raid the office? I'm like, I don't know, maybe about the Chinese ammo. He's like, but that stuff doesn't even violate the embargo. Why, you know, like that's not illegal. That's just a breach of contract. They shouldn't be raiding the office over that. And I'm like, I don't know, man, I'm just telling you. And he's like, okay, well, let me see if I could find out what's going on. He calls up, so after I left, Ephraim replaced me with a guy named Danny. And he ended up screwing Danny also, of course, and the guy he replaced Danny with. That's just how he did things. And so Alex calls up Danny, and he's like, he wanted to feel him out. So he's like, "Hey, Danny," because he knew everyone had been kicked out of the office, you know, so that they could take the computers and the documents and everything. He says to Danny, he's like, "Hey, Danny, I need you know, this document because I've got an aircraft landing later today, you know, for the export permit. Can you get me that?" And Danny, he hears Danny cover the mouthpiece of his phone, whisper to Ephraim. I guess he didn't cover it well enough. He whispered to Ephraim, hey, Ephraim, it's Alex. He needs this document from the office. What should I tell him?" And Ephraim says, "Oh man, those documents are in the office. We can't get that to him right now. Tell him there was a bomb threat. Yeah, tell him there was a bomb threat, and we had to leave the office, and so we can't get him documents now, but we'll get it to him later." And so Danny gets back on the phone, "Oh, there was a bomb threat. We can't get you that document." And Alex is thinking, why are they fucking lying to me? You know, maybe Ephraim's going to try to pin everything on me. You know, he's going to say, "Oh, I had no idea any of this was going on. Alex was just trying to, you know, protect his cushy job in Albania, you know, by doing this without my knowledge." And he's like, "I'm not going down for this motherfucker," you know. And so he was on the next flight back. And both Alex and I contact defense attorneys, and we tell them what's going on. And the defense. And
you must be freaking out.
Oh, we are freaking out, freaking out.
And are you telling your girlfriend anything at this time?
Not yet.
Yeah,
I wanted to know what the possibilities were. You know, I didn't want to freak her out. And like,
so she say, "How's work?" You'll just be like, "Good."
Yeah, exactly.
Went through a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
Yeah, we weren't actually living together at this time. So yes, I mean, I didn't like see her every day. But so we contact defense attorneys.
Crazy.
And the defense attorneys tell us, well, why don't you look in your emails for Chinese, you know, search Chinese ammunition, repackaging, anything that you think would trigger what you're worried about. And so we look, and then we found the email from Ralph with all the instructions of how to get rid of Chinese markings, and emails from Ephraim, you know, saying, make sure you remove the documents from inside the tins, and all like really incriminating evidence. And we're like, we show this to the defense attorneys, and they're like, yeah, you're fucked. You know,
Shit.
He's like, you know, I mean, if you fight, he's like, I'll always remember this. My defense attorney looks at me, and he's like, look, before I tell you your options, you know, I have to ask you a question. How much justice can you afford? And I'm like, how much justice can I afford? What does that mean? He's like, well, you know, if you want to fight the feds in court, it's going to cost you like $200,000-300K.
Yeah.
Right? Do you have that? And I'm like, no.
Yeah.
Because, you know, as soon as they raided the office, my lawyer, who I was doing the negotiation, he's like, you can't take any money from Ephraim right now. because then it'll look like he's paying you off and it'll incriminate you, you know?
Right.
So that whole thing just
out the window.
Out the window. So I'm about to be bankrupt. And so he's like, you have 300K? And I'm like, no. He's like, well, how about your parents? Do they? I'm like, no. Do they own their house? Can they remortgage? I'm like, I'm not doing that to my parents.
Yeah.
You know, and anyway, I don't think they would anyway.
Yeah.
So not for this.
Yeah.
You know.
And your parents had no idea you were
They
doing
had
any
no
of this?
idea about any of this.
Oh my God.
And so he's like, well, in that case, you don't really have an option. You really should just plead guilty. He's like, even if you did have the money, the case against you is pretty strong, so you'll probably end up losing. No guarantee. Maybe you'll get it thrown out on a technicality or something, but there's no guarantee of that. And the evidence against you is pretty strong. So, you should probably just plead guilty. So I said, well, I mean, that's my option, right? And Alex was told pretty much the same thing.
And you're just thinking worst case scenario at this time, or what's going through your mind?
Right. So I asked him, like, what are we looking at? Like, and he says, well, there's a lot of different ways to charge this. Is it a violation of an embargo? Is it fraud? So we don't really know. He's like, but it could be serious. It could be quite a few years. And if you plead guilty, you'll get a lot less, right? Especially since you're not the kingpin, right? Really, they're probably just going after Ephraim. That's like the main target. He's making all the money. He owns the company. He's making all the decisions. You were a supporting role, not innocent, but not the main guy, right?
Yeah.
So plead guilty, and they'll go easier on you. And so, we both decide to plead, to cooperate, and the federal agents interview us. And the way they do these interviews is they'll tell you, okay, you're going to tell us. We're not going to tell you what we know, but you're going to tell us everything you know. And if we think that you are omitting anything or changing anything, then you get zero credit for cooperation. You have to be 100% truthful about everything. So they scare the shit out of you.
So even if they know nothing, they say that, so it puts you in a frame of like, oh shit.
Because they want to get as much info out of you as they can, right? They don't want to tell you what they know, because then you might like.
And you don't know this at the
story.
time. You don't know this at the time.
Don't
right?
know what?
That they're doing that. Like,
Well,
with
this
that
is what
intent.
they told us when we met with them.
Okay.
So Alex, they interview us separately, and this is what they tell you in the beginning of the interview. And so I told them everything, and at the end of the interview, they're like, okay, well, thank you for telling us everything. He's like, I'm sure you're probably wondering what we know already, and just so you know, when we did the raid on the office, we found a to-do list on Ephraim's desk in his handwriting. And one of the items on the to-do list was repackaged Chinese ammo.
Just so black and white.
Just like that. Like he could have just said repackaged ammo. Like I don't know why he had to put Chinese ammo, but that's what they found on his desk.
Yeah. So it's like the little things that fucked him in the end.
Exactly. So they're like, yeah, we knew about the Chinese ammo. We were, looking into it, and it's a good thing you told us all this. And so then, they told Alex and me, they're like, we're actually, you guys aren't targets of the investigation. We're going to do our best not to charge you with anything. We're really just going after Ephraim. You cooperated. You might be called upon to be a witness in a trial if it comes to that. But other than that, we're not going to charge you. And we're like, good, because we can't afford it. And then 6 months go by and nothing happens. And we thought, well, maybe they're not going to, and Ephraim keeps on delivering, right?
Also, so while it's under investigation, it doesn't stop the delivery?
He doesn't stop delivering. He keeps on delivering the same ammo.
And are you guys in communication, you and Ephraim, at this time? Or
we're not in
Gotcha.
communication. Our lawyer told us, you cannot talk to him right now,
Okay.
And the agents also told us, the federal agents told us, you can't talk to him. So Ephraim keeps on delivering the Chinese ammo. He replaced Alex with another guy. He sent him over there. And about 6 months go by, and then on I think it was March 28th, 2008, the New York Times finally publishes their front page article with our mugshots on the front page. Like mine and Ephraim's mugshots.
On the front page?
On the front page of the New York Times, our mugshots, right next to a picture of rusty-looking ammunition, like corroded, nasty stuff.
And then it says $300 million kid, like the whole thing.
Well, the title was kind of boring. It was like supplier under investigation in Afghanistan. You know, it was like super boring, like a journalistic thing, but it was the front page.
Yeah.
And it was with our mugshots and next to rusty-looking ammo. And the ammo the way the article was written, they implied that the ammunition that we were delivering was defective and that all of it was defective, like this stuff in the picture. And the stuff that they showed in the picture wasn't even the Chinese ammo. It was actually Bulgarian ammo that Ephraim had bought sight unseen. We were buying the grenades out of Bulgaria, and we had some extra room on the aircraft. He had this offer to buy the 30,000 rounds, tiny amount, for a very, very low price. And it wasn't even worth it to fly over there to inspect the rounds because it was such a low amount and it was so cheap. And so he decided to just roll the dice. He's like, look, if they accept it, if it's good quality, they'll accept it and we'll make a massive profit margin. And if it's low quality, it's not so much money that we're spending on it. So it turned out, not surprisingly, to be utter crap. The receiving officer in Kabul took one look at it and he's like, this is garbage. I'm not accepting this. But they don't have ammunition recycling facilities in Afghanistan, and they don't want to pay to ship it back. So they just pretty much moved it to the side of the airport and let it just rot in the rain and the sun for another few months, continue to decay and corrode. And that's when the New York Times sent a reporter over there, and the reporter was asking around, can I see some of the stuff that AEY delivered? And someone pointed him at that. And so he got pictures of that, and then they implied that everything was of similar low quality, which wasn't true. I mean, the Army signed off on 99.99% of it, and they were very happy with the quality. So anyway, the New York Times article causes a massive firestorm, a massive political scandal. There were hearings on the floor of Congress. There's still YouTube videos out there of a senator on Congress, with one of those big easels with a big printout with a picture of my mugshot and Ephraim's mugshot. These are the guys that the Bush administration has trusted with a central part of the war on terror. You know, they're a bunch of a pot smoker and a massage therapist. So I think that's what they call it.
Crazy.
And so anyway, that caused a big political scandal.
How old are you when it's the front page of the New York Times?
I had just turned 25.
Jesus Christ!
Yeah.
Wow.
And so,
are you getting any sleep at this time, or is it just full anxiety, paranoia?
I was very anxious, especially when, before the New York Times article came out, I kind of calmed down because 6 months happened with nothing, going on. So I thought, well, maybe they're just going to let the investigation go. They don't charge everything that they investigate, maybe they, for whatever reason, maybe they didn't think the evidence was good enough. Maybe,
and they're still delivering, so
and they're still delivering.
Yeah.
Maybe it's the Army's pulling some strings to continue the deliveries, which actually is what happened. We found out later. So I'll just do a little tangent. So Ralph, our investor, decided to take it to trial. And when you go to trial, you go through the discovery process where you get to ask the government for their internal emails and stuff like that. So we got to see a lot of the government's internal emails that they were emailing each other. And it turned out that after the Justice Department raided the office, they sent an email to the U.S. Army informing them that it was Chinese ammo that they were taking delivery on, and they should stop taking delivery on it. The Army responds back to them saying, this ammunition is critical to the mission in Afghanistan. If you want us to stop taking delivery on it, we will need a letter from the Attorney General of the United States instructing us to cease taking delivery on it. Wow. And the Attorney General never sent that letter. So they kept on taking delivery on it for the next 6 months. And 3-4 aircraft a week for the next 6 months of this ammunition they knew was Chinese. Turned out that they even knew before they sent them that email. The State Department knew because Alex had met with one of the representatives from the embassy in Albania And the guy straight up told him, he's like, oh yeah, this stuff is all Chinese, but it's, from before the embargo, and they're trying to join NATO, so this is a great solution to get rid of this ammunition.
They downplayed it.
So they downplayed it. They're like, this is great. This is a win-win-win for everybody. And it's a win for the Afghanis, for the US taxpayer, save a lot of money, for the Albanians, is great, So the State Department, who's really in charge of enforcing embargoes, knew that about this whole thing. They have people on the ground in Albania. They have a whole embassy there, and who are very well aware of Albania's history. So they knew about it, and they just didn't care. But once the New York Times published this article, 2 days later, the U.S. Army put out a statement saying, we had no idea about any of this, we're shocked and appalled, and we're canceling AEY's contract. And then like a few days after that, the Justice Department announced that they were charging us with fraud.
Wow.
And they didn't keep to their promise not to charge Alex and me. They told us, hey, we're very sorry, but you guys were just too heavily involved in this whole operation for us to realistically charge Ephraim without charging you guys. So, and the way they charged us was they said we had delivered 71 aircraft loads of this ammunition, of the Chinese ammunition. And in each aircraft load, we submitted the certificate of conformance. And one of the things on this document that was included with each delivery was place of origin. And we put Albania. And they said, well, you knew it was actually China. And not only did you know, you had a whole operation to disguise it. So each submission of this document is an act of fraud. And this is 71 acts of fraud, and you can get 5 years in prison for each one. So you're looking at 355 years in prison, unless you plead guilty. If you plead guilty, we'll combine 71 acts into one. So the max you can get is 5 years, and because you're pleading guilty, we're going to put in the plea agreement that us as prosecutors will recommend to the judge. The judge decides your sentence. We can't have no say over the sentence. It's up to the judge. But we'll recommend to the judge, and that the judge gives you the low end of the guidelines. So maybe you'll do a year, maybe just probation. We can't speak for the judge. But we'll recommend that, and the judge usually listens to the prosecutors when making recommendations, especially low recommendations. The judge will usually listen to the prosecutor. So they're like, what is it going to be? You want to risk 355 years in prison, and you need $300K to pay your lawyer for a chance at that. Or you want to just plead guilty and maybe just get probation. So of course,
up to 5 years.
Or up maximum, that's if the judge is having a really bad day and goes against the recommendations. In a worst case scenario, we would get 5 years, still beats 355 years.
Right.
But the most likely scenario is that we would get on the low end of the 5 years because we pled guilty. You usually get credit for pleading guilty, and it was also our first offense. We hadn't been, convicted of anything before, so they usually give you on the low end for that too. And so of course we pled guilty. Ephraim tried to fight him for a little bit, but eventually realized he was going to lose, and so he pled guilty too. Ralph decided to take it all the way to court, ended up losing. He got sentenced to 4 years in prison. Ralph, he's an older gentleman at the time, so it's pretty rough for him. He spent I think between $1 and $2 million on his defense.
Wow.
Because to go all the way to court. And he also because they had tried him twice. The first time was a hung jury, and then they had to do the whole thing again, so he had to pay twice. And he had invested, I think, $1.5 million into Ephraim's company to fund the Afghan contract, and Ephraim never gave him his money back.
No way.
And not only did he not give him the profits that he made, he didn't even give him the principal. He never gave him the money back. So Ralph went completely bankrupt from this whole thing and spent 4 years in prison as a 70-year-old man. So it was really rough on Ralph. I felt really bad for Ralph. He was actually a really nice guy. Anyway, Alex and I got Alex got sentenced to 5 months of house arrest and 5 months probation. I got 7 months house arrest and 7 months probation. Enormous relief. Didn't go to prison. House arrest is heaven compared to prison.
Right.
And Ephraim probably, if I had to guess, Ephraim probably would have gotten maximum a year, maybe, because he also pled guilty. But he just couldn't stay out of the business, right? So when because Ralph was deciding to go to trial and they wanted us to be potential witnesses in Ralph's trial, they didn't want to sentence us until after Ralph's trial was done, because they wanted to hold the threat of the sentencing over us to force us to be witnesses in Ralph's trial. So they said, while you're awaiting this whole thing to play out, you can't be in the arms business, right? And obviously you can't commit any more crimes, because that will invalidate your plea agreement. If you commit any more crimes, we're going to tell the judge, give him the max, right?
Right.
So Ephraim, thinks he's smarter than everyone else, and obviously has an enormous tolerance for risk. So he gets his newest lackey, the guy he replaced, whatever last guy he screwed over, to start a company under his own name, and he starts doing business under his employees' company's name. Yeah. Now, Ephraim was a control freak, so he couldn't like let the guy do the talking. Whenever it got to the negotiating, he'd grab the phone and start doing the negotiating. He's a very good negotiator. He's a great talker. So he did this. He was trying to negotiate some deal with a gun dealer out of Orlando. Gun dealer realizes who he is. Realizes
no way. He just knew who he was.
Yeah. I mean, it was over the course of a few different conversations, and eventually he realizes who he is.
Did the article come out at this time? By the time these conversations?
Well, the New York Times article had come. Yeah, this is after that, because the New York Times article caused them to charge us, so we pled guilty. Right. So he Googles Ephraim, he sees the New York Times article, realizes,
that's why I asked.
This guy is a convicted felon, and he's probably trying to entrap me into doing something illegal to get some time off his sentence, right? And so the gun dealer, calls up the ATF, right, the Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms Administration, who's in charge of enforcing gun laws in the United States, and he tells them, hey, I got this convicted felon who's trying to do an arms deal with me. What should I do? They tell him, why don't you introduce one of our undercover agents as your business partner? He introduces the undercover agent. Undercover agent tells Ephraim, look, I'm the kind of guy who, needs to shake your hand and look you in the eye before I do a deal. Why don't you drive up to Orlando so we can meet in person and finalize this thing? And he, knowing that Ephraim was not allowed to leave the Southern District of Florida, so he would be violating the terms of his bond if he left Miami. So Ephraim is like, oh yeah, I'm that kind of guy too. That's how men do business. And so he drives up to Orlando, meets the undercover agent. Undercover agent pops open the trunk of his car, and he's like, hey, check that out. I just got the latest HK handgun. This thing's so cool, and knowing Ephraim's a gun nut. And knowing also that it's illegal for a convicted felon to be in possession of a firearm. You can get up to 10 years in prison. Ephraim says, oh, I heard about that thing. That thing's so cool. Let me see that. Picks it up. What can I say? Once a gun runner, always a gun runner. Am I right?
Really? Wow.
Agent slaps cuffs on him. You're under arrest, felon in possession of a firearm.
Oh my God.
He could get up to 10 years in prison. So, and of course he violated the terms of his bond, so they weren't going to give him another one, so he had to spend like a year in county jail, which was rough, while he was awaiting sentencing. He could have gotten 10 years for the gun charge and 5 years for the fraud charge, in total 15, but he hired the best lawyers in Miami, spent millions on them, my millions, and and he negotiated it down to 4 years total, and he got out in like 3.5.
Wow.
So yeah.
That's insane. And you guys have never spoken since?
Well, I sued him again, and so I saw him in a deposition. Ended up settling with him. I just wanted him out of my life. Yeah. But for me, the house arrest thing was actually a big turning point in my life, because while I was under house arrest, I was playing I'm a musician, so I was playing a lot of guitar, and I really missed playing with the drummer, because drums give the music energy. And so I bought a drum machine, which is this electronic device that makes drum beats you can play your guitar along to. But every time I wanted the drum beat to change, like from going from verse to chorus, I'd have to stop playing my guitar, press a button on the machine, go back to playing my guitar. And so I thought, man, I really need this thing in a pedal format so I could just tap it with my foot to change the beat. And I went online to try to buy something. I thought someone already made it, and nobody made it. And I told my musician friends about it, and they're like, yeah, I mean, that sounds awesome. Never seen it, but if you find it, let me know. I want one too. Yeah. And so I realized, wow, this is a really good idea. A lot of people want this. So it took me about 3 years, but eventually I built it. Wow. Not personally, but like I hired an engineering team to build it. And it's called the Beat Buddy, like your buddy that plays the beat. Yeah. Check it out, Beat Buddy.
Beat Buddy.
Beat Buddy. And it became an enormous hit. Won a whole bunch of awards in the industry. A lot of famous musicians use it now. And it made millions of dollars. That launched my new company, my current company, Singular Sounds, not new because that was 10 years ago. But it came out in 2014, and it's been a best-selling product since. I've come out with a whole bunch of other musical products as well, like for the musicians in the audience, they'll know what I'm talking about. Aeros Looper, which is the world's most advanced looping pedal. It allows you to hands-free record different layers of music and be like a full one-man band. The MIDI Maestro, which allows you to control a whole bunch of other musical products, a cable wrapping device, so a bunch of different products. So that was the launch of my career as an inventor. So I went from like arms dealer to inventor, starting out with musical products, but recently we launched our first non-musical invention, which is a device called InstaFloss.
Yep, I've seen that online. It's badass.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it flosses all your teeth for you in 10 seconds. It's like an advanced water pick. It uses 12 water jets in like a H-shaped manifold, and you just slide it across your teeth, and it flosses all your teeth comfortably and effectively in like 10 seconds.
Dude, that's awesome. And those were born out of the house arrest situation and wanting to reinvent yourself. Exactly. What do I do next? What can I do now?
Exactly. Yeah, because I was like, what am I going to do? And because I also, part of my sentence was that I was banned from doing government contracting for 15 years.
Wow.
So I was like, well, there goes my whole plan of starting a company. One thing I forgot to mention, the day before the New York Times article came out, I had just been informed by the U.S. Army that they were going to do an audit on my company for a contract that I had bid on that was going to net me like $1.5 million.
Wow.
So I was about to make $1.5 million, all for myself, with no Ephraim, 100% of the profit. And then the next day, the New York Times article comes out.
Oh man!
And then, well, I had made a deal similar to what we did with AEY with Wells Fargo for the factoring agreement. Then the Wells Fargo banker called me up, and he's like, "I just read this article in the New York Times about you." He's like, considering the political situation, we're afraid we're going to have to, rescind our offer of financing. And because, of course, I didn't have the financing, the whole thing collapsed.
Contract.
So. Yeah. So
what's the biggest thing you learned in that season of life? Because I'm sure like a lot of stuff about expectation. I'm sure, right? I'm sure there was a lot of inner work. They say you meet your best self in your worst times. I'm curious, what did that season of life teach you that ended up setting you up later?
A lot of things. One thing I learned is that one of the most important factors of success is how hard you work. And it sounds obvious, and it's something that everyone says, oh, you gotta grind, blah, blah, blah. But I saw it happen. Like, I saw us beat much bigger companies just because we worked harder. We contacted more people, we were more creative, we were, just grinded harder, and we beat much bigger people with more experience just because we were willing to work hard. And for all of his faults, and there are many, right? I will give Ephraim this, is that I've never seen anyone work harder than him. Like he's just obsessed. I mean, to an unhealthy degree. very, very unhealthy degree. I mean, he would literally work from the second he woke up to the second
Was he on Adderall or Coke?
He was on everything, actually. He was literally on everything. So he would do lines of Coke. He always tried to get me to do Coke. I never liked Coke.
Yeah.
It's just like, I think it's very overrated.
So he would just
personally.
get loaded and just work.
Yeah, he would get loaded, and I never understood how he could just rip bong rips and work. Like for me, like weed is like a relaxing thing. It's not a working thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like weed for me gives me ideas. Mm-hmm. Like I have all my great ideas for my inventions I've had when I was high. All right, all the songs I've written when I was high.
Yeah.
So if anyone wants to check out my personal music, you can go to Spotify, Apple Music. Just put in my name, David Packouz. You'll hear my original music.
That's awesome.
But. Yeah, I mean, but he, like, I think no matter what state of mind he was in, he was all about work. You know, like that was the only, I never seen him read a book. I'd never seen him read any article or even have a conversation about anything that was not money-making related. Here, I'll tell you one story that I think is kind of hilarious and sad at the same time, which kind of sums up Ephraim. We had at the time, that we were working together, we had a mutual friend of ours, part of our friend group. We were all a pretty close group of guys who we all like grew up in the religious upbringing, and then we kind of all left the religion together, so we were very tight. There was one of the members of our group who became addicted to heroin. And he was like very depressed. He was suffering from depression, and we were all talking, and we were all worried about him, you know. And Ephraim says, he's like, what? He's like super depressed and addicted to heroin? I've got a great idea. We're gonna take out a life insurance policy on him and then send him a massive amount of heroin. It can't fail. We're like looking at it like, what, you fucking piece of shit?
Yeah.
You're like literally trying to get your friend killed so you can make. Now I think he said it as a joke.
Yeah.
But it was only half a joke.
Yeah,
you
but
know
it's
what
the
I
fact
mean?
that it was top of mind.
But that's the first thing he thought of. That was the first thing. Like we were all talking about, like, what should we do? Should we get him, you know, like committed into a rehab program? Like who's the right person to talk to him? To, you know, like we were all worried about him, and that's the first thing he thought of. It's just like boom, just like that. And we're like, oh my god, this guy is a fucking sociopath.
That's insane.
So yeah, it was really. He's quite a guy, and I actually bumped into someone who's interacted with him recently, and they told me that he's the exact same guy that he always was, still like working like 3 days without sleep and passing out for a day, and you know it's like just like he's a workaholic. There's just something in his brain. He's not a normal guy. Yeah,
that's how he operates.
So
That's wild.
yeah. So I would say, but. One thing I learned from him is the value of hard work. You know, the harder you work, the more successful you are, and it's an enormous part of success. But I also learned a lot of things of what not to do. Right? I mean, there are certain things that are just not worth it. You know, like even if you are going to make more money, it's not worth screwing everybody you come in contact with. It's just like I would rather sleep easier at night and have less money. You know, it's just like. I'll lose the money, you know, rather than have a whole string of enemies who I have to worry about plotting against me. Like he doesn't, like Ephraim doesn't do interviews like this. Right. He doesn't want to be recognized on the street. You know, he screwed over a lot of people, right? A lot of people who he shouldn't have screwed over. You know, he doesn't want people to know where he lives because a lot of people sue him, and it's they need to serve him papers, and so he avoids having his address public. You know, so there's a lot, like he's always in it. It's always like a stressful situation, and I realized, you know what? That works for him. Obviously, he's made many millions of dollars. I'm sure he's still very rich. You know, but you don't have to do that to become very rich. I'm relatively successful now too, and I did it the right way. I did it without making enemies. I made many friends in business. I've made other people a lot of money, and I don't feel bad about that. I don't feel bad. Oh, I could have made more money. I should have struck a harder deal with that guy. No, I'm happy that guy's happy. We continue to do more business together. You know, it's a different way of doing business.
And I think experiencing that extremity so young too appropriates it for the rest of your life. So like, I don't need anything crazy.
Exactly. Exactly.
Just want to dot my I's, keep it legal.
It's not worth it. It's not worth it. I think that one thing that he just doesn't see is just the value of your life outside of business. You know, like, we are more than just our jobs. We are more than just our careers, and you know, our relationships are more than just transactional. So, having an appreciation for that and a value for that isn't just money, I think makes us happier and more developed as human beings. And I think that that's one of the most important lessons that I took away from that.
What did you learn about money as a whole?
Money is obviously very important, right? It's how our entire society functions. And it's money is how we put a number to value, right? It's when you're negotiating about something, right? It's how much do you value it versus how much do I value it, right? And that's what the negotiation's about, right? It's like, if you know, we each of us want you know, this glass or whatever, how much are you willing to pay for it? How much am I willing to pay for it, right? That's how we ascribe a number to value. And in negotiations, it's really who, and he actually, Ephraim said this, a negotiation is a contest between people of who can come up with a better reason of why things should go their way, right? That's what a negotiation is.
Who can come up with a better reason of why things should go their way?
Exactly. Because, I mean, just because you want more money isn't, it's not a good reason.
That's not compelling to the other side.
It's not compelling. It's not, they want more money too, right? But you have to come up with reasons of why it should go your way, right? And it's not, and the reason can't be just because I want money, right? It should be because of this, that, you know. And he was very good at making up reasons, so that's why he was such a good negotiator. Now, one of his flaws is that he was so good at making up reasons that sometimes the reasons he would make up would be ridiculous, and people would, like, be obvious.
See through them,
so it wouldn't be a good lie. It would be just like an outrageous lie. One example of that is he once was late on delivering some delivery to Iraq, and the contracting officer was furious and calling him up. He's like, "Why did you do?" And he's like, "No, you don't understand. There was a hurricane in Florida, and that delayed the shipment." And the guy says, "What, you think we don't get the weather and the news in Iraq? I know there's no hurricane in Florida, you fucking idiot." You know? He's just
winging it.
Yeah, he's just winging it, just making crap up, you know, like on the fly. And sometimes his lies were not good.
And then fast forward to today, present day. I know legally, as part of your plea deal, you can't do anything for 15 years. Right.
So that just expired, like a year or two ago, actually. And I think 2022 is when. So nice. So I was, ever since the movie came out. The movie came out in 2016.
Was that surreal the day you found out? What was it like the day you found out a movie was going to be made about your life?
Oh, that was crazy. So the way that happened was Rolling Stone wrote, so after the New York Times published their article, pretty much I had every journalist in the world trying to call me. And I had got a voicemail from Rolling Stone. And so I was like, "Oh, Rolling Stone, you know, I'm a musician, you know." And I called up the guy back, and I told him, like, "You know, I've always dreamed about to be written about in Rolling Stone, just not for this."
Yeah, exactly.
And he's like, "Well, we could mention your music in the article, you know." He's like, "Because this story is perfect for Rolling Stone. Rolling Stone loves these kinds of stories." And so I said, "Well, my lawyer says I can't really talk to anyone." He's like, "Don't worry, I'll talk to your lawyer." My lawyer said, "Okay, you could interview him as long as you don't publish until after all his legal jeopardy is passed." And he made a commitment to that. And to his credit, he didn't publish. Rolling Stone didn't publish the article until 2011, which is 3 years after the New York Times article was published, after I had already been sentenced. And when the Rolling Stone did a whole investigation, and they interviewed me, they interviewed Ephraim briefly before he decided he wanted to do his own thing and didn't want to cooperate. And they interviewed people from the government side. They reviewed all the documents that was published from Ralph's trial that was published. And so it became one of the longest articles that Rolling Stone ever published. Wow. And it was a really in-depth investigative journalistic piece, very well written. And Todd Phillips, director of the Hangover movies and later Joker, saw the Rolling Stone article and thought, this is the greatest fucking story ever. I need to make a movie about this. And so he optioned the rights of the article. And they also optioned my life rights. That's what they call it, the life rights. They didn't have to option my life rights. They actually, legally, if you're a public figure, meaning your name has appeared in the media, you're now a public figure, and they can make any work of fiction, including your real name, and say anything they want about you, and they don't have to pay you a penny. But because they wanted to advertise the movie as based on a true story, they wanted, like an inside person to, give it a little bit more authenticity. So that's why they optioned my life rights. I didn't make as much as Miles Teller did, pretending to be me, but I made a little bit. And so yeah, but he was in the middle at the time. This was in 2011 when the Rolling Stone article was published, and Todd was in the middle of making Hangover 2. So, and then when they finished Hangover 2, he decided to make Hangover 3 because that's a surefire moneymaker. And then they did War Dogs. So he filmed War Dogs in 2015, and it came out in 2016. And and it was super cool because it was like I got to go to the premiere. I got to meet Ana de Armas, who's absolutely gorgeous in real life. Just as gorgeous.
She's the actress who plays your...
in My Ex-Girlfriend. Yeah. My ex-girlfriend does not look like Ana de Armas. Everyone asks me that. My ex-girlfriend was very beautiful, but in a different way. She actually looked more like... I don't know how to pronounce her name. Halle Berry. That's how you say her name. Halle Berry. She was like dark. My ex-girlfriend was half African, but like half African, half white. So she like more a mulatto mix. Very beautiful girl, but not anything like Ana de Armas in looks. Though she was happy that Ana de Armas played her. She's like, oh, they got the skinniest, prettiest bitch to play me. That's all that matters.
That's awesome. And then when you're in the premiere, what's that like? The day you're in the premiere, Jonah Hill, Todd Phillips, it's a movie about your life, your story.
It was super cool. I went to the premiere at the Chinese Theater in Hollywood, and I mean, I met Bradley Cooper, who's like super fucking tall. I mean, this guy is like, you can't really tell people's height in movies, but Miles Teller is also very tall, but Bradley Cooper is even taller. Jonah Hill is like, I think, even shorter than I am. That's, I mean, I'm not short, I'm like average, but so it's just interesting to see people in real life, it always feels different in real life when you meet people that you see on screen in real life. So there was there's this one scene in the movie. So we were all watching the movie in the premiere. And there's this one scene where Jonah Hill is like, he's recruiting a bunch of people to work for us, and he goes, fact, 6 months ago, David was jerking off guys for money, and today he drives a Porsche. And Miles Teller says, that's not a fact. And Jonah Hill says, that's a fact. And then I yelled out, not a fact. The whole theater like looked at me and they all laughed.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So that was fun.
Surreal moments. And now, as you look back, I know you're also now helping people because so many people have been talking about government contracts nowadays.
Yes.
Seems like there's been a resurgence of people and their interest in it. And you actually just co-founded and started recently. Have had a bunch of success stories. Of the War Dogs Academy.
Yes. So
now, for people who may or may not have seen the War Dogs film, they probably heard this interview. Can you give a little bit of context about what you guys teach and help people with?
Sure. So the way that happened was, as soon as the movie came out, I had people like flooding my DMs, begging me to teach them how to do government contracting. And I hadn't, done it in years, so I didn't know like how up to date my knowledge was, and I was already busy doing Singular Sound, my music tech company, and I was working on InstaFloss, so I had my hands full, and I was like, I'm banned from doing it myself at that time. So I didn't want to get into government contracting again, but people kept on contacting me over the years. I think like hundreds, if not more than 1,000 people have contacted me.
And then just offered to pay you for consulting.
Yeah, I've been offered to get paid. I've had people, say, oh, I'll give you 90% of the company. You can own it. I'll just teach me I'll do all the work, and etc. Like people begging me.
Just
literally.
hand you equity.
Exactly. And I was like, I don't know how serious these guys are. Like people may talk a big talk talk in the beginning, but then when they realize how much work it is, they, oftentimes give up. So I didn't want to spend my time on it. But then about a year ago, I got a message, I think it was on Instagram, from a guy named Logan, and he told me, he messaged me, he's like, hey, I just wanted to let you know that about 6 years ago, my partner James and I, we were 21 years old, we were dead broke, picking bananas on a farm in Australia. And they're American guys, but they traveled through Thailand, they ran out of money, they decided to make some money doing agricultural labor in Australia. And one of the farm would have movie nights, and one of the movies they showed was War Dogs. And they thought to themselves, well, if these guys are our age, like if they can do it, why can't we do it? And so they threw themselves into it, they got obsessed, and they taught themselves how to do the whole government contracting process. They started bidding on a whole bunch of contracts. They got lucky and got like a small laundry services contract. And then they built up from there, getting bigger and bigger contracts. And they said, and 6 years later, we have a multi-million-dollar government contracting business, and it's all thanks to War Dogs.
Wow.
We're flying all over the world, we're taking care of laundry services in Germany, and we're going to Thailand, we're doing all these really cool stuff. We're living the dream. And we would have never done it if we didn't see War Dogs. And so I thought to myself, well, these guys have current multi-million-dollar active contracts, they're bidding on new contracts all the time, they're as up to date as it can get. I have all these people who are begging me to teach them how to do this. So I told Logan and James, I'm like, well, why don't we start a online school where we can create a course to teach people how to do government contracting, because it's pretty technical, and it's hard to teach yourself. So we created War Dogs Academy. They loved the idea, of course. We created War Dogs Academy. We created a step-by-step course. We made it as simple as possible, so that even people who know absolutely nothing about government contracting or about business in general can just follow the steps. And we also have a community where, like a forum, where the students can all interact with each other and ask each other questions. And we hired a retired government contracting officer, a lady named Anna, who did government contracting for about 10 years for the government. She was in charge of awarding contracts, and so she knows what the government's looking for, and she understands everything. And so she's available for our students who are struggling with any particular aspect of the process. She also reviews their proposals before they submit it to the government to make sure that they're doing everything correctly. So it's an enormous value add. We're saving our students massive amounts of time that they would have to spend to teach themselves, as well as all the mistakes they would have made along the way. And one of the things we're most excited about as part of the Academy is that we also have a financing division. So for the people who don't have any money to finance the contracts, because you need to pay your supplier and then deliver to the government and pay the logistics people to ship, and then wait 30 days later to get paid by the government, we have a network of investors who fund government contracts to support our students, as long as they set it up correctly the way we teach in the course, of course.
Wow.
So and we only launched it like 3 months ago, and so far we've had 25 students win government contracts.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
What does that feel like for you?
It feels awesome. It really does. It's super cool, because it's like, I've had, like, for years, I've had, like, people just begging me to teach them how to do this, and I was like, oh, I don't have time, I'm busy with doing other things, and I'm not even sure I'd be, I'd be doing you a service, considering that my knowledge is from back 2008, and to see that people are actually going from, like, zero to hero, going from literally knowing nothing to having hundreds of thousands of dollars in contracts. One lady who's one of our, this just happened last week, lady named Sylvia, she just won a $188,000 contract. That's her first contract she ever won, and she has a 10% profit margin on it. So she's going to make 18 grand off this contract. Wow. And that's her first contract.
Yes.
And so more than paid the cost of the course.
No, that's cool. And it's a lifelong skill, because the government's never going out of business.
Never going to go out of business.
They're never going to not use mom and pops. And there's never not going to be opportunity.
And it's a great business, because even when the economy is tanking, the government never stops spending. In fact, like we saw with the pandemic, when the economy tanks, the government ramps up spending. So your business could be doing, usually your government contracting business will do even better in times of crises and times of recession than like the average business will be doing.
Yeah.
So it's a great business to be in. Once you learn the system, it's just a never-ending sea of opportunities. So one thing people always ask me there, and we've seen this comments on our Instagram, and for people who want to follow us on Instagram, it's War Dogs Academy. Just that's the thing, War Dogs Academy. You could also go to the website, wardogsacademy.com. And so one thing we see a lot of comments on our Instagram is, well, if you guys can make so much money, why are you teaching other people how to do it? Why don't you just make the money yourself?
Right.
And what they don't realize is that the government puts out 30,000 contracts every single day. 30,000 new solicitations hit the website every single day, which means that nobody could look at it all, let alone work on it all. It's literally impossible. And what people will do is, if you have a specialty, like we always encourage our students, if you know a particular industry, just bid on those contracts because you already have knowledge, you have connections, you're not starting from zero. If you're just literally starting from zero, then just bid on a bunch of different ones, and you'll eventually get lucky on one of them, and that can become your specialty, and you build from there. You build your past performance, you build your knowledge, your connections in the industry. So, and because the government buys literally everything, there's all the industries to work in. Like my partners, they specialized in, my partners in War Dogs Academy, they specialize in laundry services. I've never done a laundry contract. They never did an arms contract. One of our other students just got a contract that's worth more than $100 grand for drones, and another one for ice baths, for a base. Another guy got a contract for hypnotherapy services. Like there's literally everything, like anything that is in the economy, other than the illegal stuff, I would imagine, the government buys because they're supporting millions of people in their departments. So the opportunities are endless.
And I love that you mentioned, for a lot of people intimidated, the fact that these corporations or companies with hundreds of employees or dozens of employees, a lot of times, just because they have that infrastructure, can kind of get lazy and not work as hard as 2 or 3 guys who are convicted to a new model or committed to making something work.
Happens all the time. My partners told me that when they were first starting out and they were bidding on these laundry services contracts, they were bidding against companies that had been there for decades and were used to just winning contracts with very little competition. And then they came in and they just started to underbid them. And the contracting officers were thrilled because they're like, you know what? We've been tired. These guys are just, they're just used to, they feel entitled. All these, old contracting guys, because they've been winning for decades and they don't really put in the effort. And you guys are young and hungry, and you guys are going the extra mile. You're willing to negotiate. You're willing to do things faster. Give us better service, and the contracting officers love that. So the government, by and large, loves new entrants into the field. They love encouraging people who are brand new to the game, and they usually go the extra mile to help you. So obviously the government is made of people, and people are different, and some there will be assholes everywhere, but by and large most contracting officers love helping new guys into the industry. It's something that they know is good for the government because the government gets a better deal, but it's also good for them because new, young and hungry contractors are generally going to give them way better service and make their lives easier than the old guys who are just used to winning without much effort. And contracting officers, as any government employee, it's all about making their lives easier, right? They're not making more money in either direction. No matter who wins the contract, they get paid the same. It's really, are you going to make their lives easier? Then you're going to make their lives harder. That's kind of how they look at it. And if you're gonna do a better job than the other guys, they're thrilled to give you that.
Yeah. Dude, that's phenomenal. What an incredible story.
Thank you.
That's awesome. And where can people, if they want to check out the War Dogs Academy or follow you on social media, I know you mentioned the link,
Yeah.
but where can people find you if they want to?
So I'm on social media, David Packouz, that's Packouz. Could also look up my name in the War Dogs movie, you'll see how it's spelled.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm on Instagram. I have a little YouTube channel just for my own personal stuff. If you're curious about my music, you could just search my name on Spotify and Apple Music, Amazon, etc. Use Twitter a little, but not much. But for War Dogs Academy, you can go to wardogsacademy.com. Our social media handles are also all War Dogs Academy.
Awesome. And we'll plug those below as well for you.
Yeah, Singular Sound. You could check out Singular Sound if you're a musician and want to see the most brilliant musical products ever made. And InstaFloss, it's just instafloss.com. Check it out. Get yourself an InstaFloss and take care of your teeth.
I love it. All right, and then last question I have. For men and women around the world watching, maybe they're at whatever season of life they're in, whether they're in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, whatever it is, a lot of people watch the show because they want to take their life to the next level. Maybe they're stuck, maybe they feel limited by beliefs, past experiences, whatever it is. What advice would you give to people who are trying to find their direction in business, find their way, get out of a hard point? You know, whether it be, you know, from lessons you've learned to find success, the core lessons to get you out of tough times, or maybe in general, just entrepreneurship advice that helps people get unstuck. You know, what would be your best sort of 60 seconds of wisdom to somebody trying to make their life work?
I would say that I think it's always very important to take the broad view in life in general. And I love the phrase, and this is, you know, very common, but this too shall pass, right? And that's true for the bad times, but as well as the good times. So don't get too hung up on the bad times and don't get too full of yourself on the good times, because no matter how good or how bad, it's going to change in the future. So I think that kind of gives you a more even keel to deal with all situations in a more rational way, rather than getting ahead of yourself. And as far as like getting yourself unstuck, I think as far as business goes, and this might be a little cliche, but it's cliche because it's true. You kind of have to find something that resonates with you. You know, people are good at different things, right? Ephraim was good at grinding 18 hours a day and using dirty tricks, right? He's very good at that. I'm not encouraging people to do that, you know, the dirty tricks part, but he was very good at it, right? Personally, I found that, you know, I could do the grind. I have done the grind, but I enjoy doing creative stuff more. I enjoy inventing things. I enjoy starting new businesses. Not everyone has those talents, right? And there are different talents. Grinding is a talent. If you're good at grinding, then government contracting is definitely for you, because that's what it's all about. If you're willing to grind, you can make millions of dollars doing government contracting. Very little creativity required, right? You just need to be willing to work your ass off, right? That's really it. If that's not your thing, just find what interests you and what you enjoy, and because what you enjoy will tend to be what you become good at. Because if you enjoy it, you do it more, and if you do it more, you get better at it, and if you get better at it, you become more successful at it, and it's just a snowball effect.
So find a vehicle that like honors your inner rhythm, your
exactly.
inner,
Exactly. It's got to mesh with your strengths.
I love it. Dave, thank you so much for being on the show.
My pleasure, Omar.
Guys, make sure to follow David down below, as well as check out the War Dogs Academy. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and let us know if we do round 2 again. What question would you ask David? Comment down below. We look forward to reading those. Until next time, live strong, live with passion, and we'll see you guys on the next inspiring episode. Peace.